Question.
Yeah, yeah. But it was. Oh.
Good morning, everyone. The time is now 10 o'clock, so I suggest we begin. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who have joined us today for this meeting of the Highways and Transport Committee. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and post to social media during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everybody turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate while the meeting is taking place? Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website afterwards. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit and assemble at the rear of the building by the lunch area. Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Would the Democratic Services Manager please report any apologies for absence? Dan?
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillors Dew, Maguire and Milnes, and Councillors Wilson, Hunt and Whelan are substituting respectively.
Thank you very much, Dan. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? No? Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. So we are next being asked to approve the minutes of the Highways and Transport Committee meeting on the 25th of April, 2023, our little short meeting, as an accurate record. If any member does not agree, would you raise your hand now? Brilliant. We are also being asked to note the updated action log. Members, you have in front of you a further updated action log, a copy of which has also been placed on the website. Can I ask members if they have any questions on its content? No. Brilliant. Okay, so item 3 is petitions and public questions. We've received one public question that I'll take with the relevant agenda item. The first substantive item on today's agenda is a report on improving transport connectivity for Cambridgeshire. Please could David Allett, Assistant Director of Highways, introduce the report. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. This information-only paper seeks to distill and summarise the range of activities taking place with our partners to shape and deliver our future sustainable transport ambition. The purpose of this paper is to frame the work that's currently being undertaken by the County Council and its partners and to outline the potential benefits that could be delivered for communities across the county. To support healthy, prosperous and sustainable communities now and in the future, we need to transform the public transport network. We set out overarching goals of this transformation in section 1 of the paper, and these are informed by the Emerging Local Transport and Connectivity Plan, the LTCP. Public transport, and particularly buses, have a key role to play. We know the pandemic hit the bus industry hard, and the industry is still recovering. To deliver the changes, we need a clear strategy and funding, and this paper sets out pathways in this regard. The bus strategy and the Bus Service Improvement Plan, or BSIP, sets out what we can achieve in terms of an integrated, connected, reliable, urban and rural, affordable green network. We're working with the Combined Authority and partners on this, and the updated BSIP will be considered by the CPCA in the autumn. In 2.6 of the paper, we set how our innovative technology is already being embraced through electric and autonomous buses. The current deregulated bus market does limit the level of control and responsiveness that the public sector has in shaping the network. There are significant opportunities in reforming the bus network, and options are being explored. In November 2023, the Combined Authority Board will consider whether to consult on bus franchising, with an ultimate decision next summer. The GCP's City Deal programme will provide infrastructure to support active, safe and rapid sustainable travel options, including new busways and active travel corridors, and a review of the road hierarchy and parking strategy. Another component to the City Deal programme is making connections. In July 2022, this committee delegated to the GCP consultation of making connections. This consultation is now complete with over 24,000 responses. We attach the results to the paper as Appendix A for information. The results do show general support for public transport improvements. However, it's clear that there are a number of questions that have been raised about the strategic transport charging zone, which need to be fully considered before a recommendation is made by the GCP. Therefore, it's clear that there is further work to do in shaping proposals to effectively respond to the consultation. County Council officers will work with the GCP on this, informed by high-level thematic options set out by the GCP Executive Board. Any future decision to approve the establishment of an STZ would be for full council to make. This would be informed by an outline business case and implementation plan. In addition to the above, we will continue to work with partners to pursue other ways to fund the sustainable network of the future, including bids to government, for example, through the BSIP, through developer funding and Section 106, and identifying new efficiencies by coordinating public and private transport services. Thank you. Just one update regarding point 2.2 on the paper relating to reform. Whilst the paper was on the Combined Authority Forward Plan for the July at the time of writing, I've been informed that this will not come forward then. Technical work will continue in assessing franchising and enhanced partnerships to inform the November decision-making paper. Therefore, the timescales remain on track. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Members, before we move to the debate, does anybody have any questions of clarifications? Yeah, okay, go on. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Can David Allard explain a little bit more why this paper is coming to us at this stage? Because I'm just confused what is being achieved by us considering this paper at this stage, please. Thank you.
Yep. The paper recognises that there are quite a lot of confusing multi-layered work streams all taking place at the same time with multiple partners. So you've got the Combined Authority looking at bus strategy and looking at bus reform. You've got the Greater Cambridge Partnership delivering their programme. You have the consultation on making connections that this committee delegated to the GCP. And what this paper seeks to do is present an information only to help distill all of those things to get a sense of how these things combined can help to deliver on the local transport and connectivity plan.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Councillor Dupre.
Thank you. It's partly arising from the issue that was mentioned in response to Councillor King's question about the complexity of all of this, and that is a very good reason, I think, to have a paper at this stage, because it sets in context all those various work streams. We're cursed with what's called these days this rich governance, aren't we, where we have such a complex, messy, multi-layered, problematic arrangement in Cambridgeshire. My question was about your comment, well, sorry, about David's comment just at the last part of what he was saying about the moving of the date for the work to look at bus governance and franchising being moved from July to November, I think. Is that correct?
The work will continue at the same rate. The programme remains the same, but there isn't a need for a report in the July cycle.
Right, but that doesn't, my question was, does that affect in any way any other decisions that any other parts of this multi-layered milfoy of governance will be required to make? No, it doesn't. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Chair. I read this paper with great interest. On 2.23, which is on page 21, it mentions potential funding mechanism, including a mayoral precept. It seems to me as if the decision to proceed has already been taken and this paper is merely a formality, because the mayor has already introduced a mayoral precept, which he has clearly stated is for the transformation of buses. Also, what concerned me is the report is still pushing forward with the STZ, even though the consultation clearly showed the majority of people are against such charging. And my last point is on page 24, the first paragraph and last bullet point, it mentions financial implications of funding of the bus network between Cambridge County Council and Combined Authority, and where responsibilities lie and fall to each party, including financial responsibilities and financial risks associated with them. I was under the impression that transport was the responsibility of Cambridge, the Cambridge Combined Authority alone, and that Cambridge County Council merely instigated what the Combined Authority wanted. So I would like to know what risks and financial implications they're talking about for Cambridge County Council.
Thank you, Councillor Hay. David, do you want to answer that last question?
So I think with respect of 2.23, these are just a range of options of potential funding sources, of which there are a wide range. The Combined Authority is the strategic transport authority for this region, but Cambridgeshire County Council remains the local highways authority. So clearly there is a close relationship between the Combined Authority and the county, but I think it's relevant to consider the fact that the flow of finance, for example, the integrated transport block, which we'll talk about later, comes directly from the Combined Authority to the county. So there is a relationship there.
There is indeed a backwards and forwards relationship. I fear we're spreading slightly into the debate here. Councillor Hay, did you have a follow-up question on that one, or should we move to debate?
Yes, I do. It still hasn't answered my question, what the financial responsibilities and risks are as connected to the transport policy. I don't feel that's been answered fully.
Okay, David, do you want to have another stab? I feel like there's an answer.
I'm not sure I understand the question, but if it's in respect to making connections and those potential proposals, obviously the resource implications of any future proposal would be subject to a full business case and not the subject of this paper.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp, is it a question or do you want to move to the debate?
It's a question. I've got loads of comments, but
go on. Let's start with the question.
And it's touching on what David said about 2.2, that it's going to go to the CPCA, and Councillor Dupre mentioned it as well. Would that go through the Transport and Infrastructure Committee first, or is that going straight to the board, or is it something you're not sure of at the moment?
I believe it's the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, but David, do you want to just?
Okay.
And then Joint Assembly and Executive Board.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. There's apparently there were 24,000 replies to the questionnaire or the survey that went out. I represent an area in East Cambs. Can you tell me how many replies you had from the heavily affected or potentially heavily affected area from East Cambs of the 24,000?
Councillor Hunt, I'm afraid I don't have that stat off the top of my head, but the consultation response is appendiced to this, and in there it is broken down by area, I believe, with all of that. Unless, David, you have that number off the top of your head. Not off the top of the head, but it is in the consultation responses. The GCP's website does actually have pretty much all of the data on it as well, so you can dig in much further if you would like to find all of that.
I'd imagine it's buried quite deep. Anyway, that was one question. And the other question was, it's quite clear that if you ask people, do you want a better bus service? do you want it to start at 6 in the morning and go on till midnight, or would you like it to be cheaper? It's pretty obvious what the answers are going to be. So I must say that my question is, are you really depending on the large amount of people who said they wanted better bus services? Because I think that was a very heavily biased question.
I'm not sure there's really a question in there, if I'm being honest, Councillor Hunt. That yes, we are looking at the consultation feedback and the things that were desired by everyone and that.
And also there seems to be a lot of exposure given to the fact that 58% of people were opposed, but as I understand it, 8% didn't have an opinion, so there were only 34% of people, 34% of people who are actually in favour of a congestion charge. So my question is to you, do you still have regard for the democratic wishes of the populace?
Of course we do, Councillor Hunt, and we are noting this here. Councillor Coutts.
Just to help Councillor Hunt there, I found it on page 31 of our papers, the number of respondents from East Cambridgeshire, which was 1,061.
Thank you, Councillor Coutts, and good reading there. Let's move on to the debate now, because I fear we have moved into the debate. Anyway, Councillor King, you can make it a question if you would like as part of the debate.
Yes, thank you, Chair. What I didn't see in this paper, and Councillor Dupre said rightly earlier that it's a massive information and a cocktail of different authorities, but I didn't see anything in this paper, and if I missed it, I apologise, David Allett, about the ambition for increasing usership of the bus service. Has any work been done on that? And if it has, shouldn't it be included with these papers, or has it and I missed it?
I don't think you have missed it, Councillor King. Remiss of me, clearly it's a fundamental component of the bus strategy, and the BSIP is to support a return of bus patronage, an industry that has struggled over a number of years, and particularly through the pandemic. So yeah, it certainly remains the case that we are pushing, and our strategies are about making the bus a more attractive option to increase patronage.
If I could just come back on that, Chair, I think this is a really important omission, because surely if we're not clear about what our ambition is in terms of increasing bus patronage, and we're going through this very painful process of possibly introducing a congestion charge, which, as we know, is hugely unpopular with a good proportion of our electorate, then I think that we've got to be very clear about what the gain will be, not just the pain. And that, I think, needs to be teased out, maybe as work at a later stage, but it has to be done. And the other comment that I would or the other question I would like to make is that I do think the title of this paper, Improving Transport and Connectivity for Cambridgeshire, is slightly misleading. And I'm being tactful here, Chair, because this is very much about South Cambs. This is not very much about the area that I represent at all. And, certainly in the villages that I represent to the north of Wisbech, they're facing a huge threat to the very poor bus service they already have. So improving transport and connectivity for Cambridgeshire, that title is not reflected in this paper. So it should be changed to improving transport and connectivity for South Cambridge.
I have to confess, Councillor King, I would completely disagree with you there. I would say there is a large amount of this, and this is where it moves on from the GCP, which is looking at South Cambs and the city, to the combined authority, the mayor and the county council, which is looking at the broader entire county, and obviously all of the franchising work, everything else that is going into the BSIP. And if you are interested in the mayor's visions in terms of bus networks and bus increased usage, please do take a look at the Transport Infrastructure Committee and a lot of the things that have been going into the BSIP there and the Mayor's desires to radically increase bus usage. But that's that. Anyway, I fear we are onto the debate. Does anybody else have any things they would like to contribute to the debate? Okay, Councillor.
Can I just have that assurance that the usage ambition and the current usage figures, that whole area, will be fully drawn out at some stage of the process?
I believe it already has been with the combined authority. There is honestly, if you are not on the Transport Infrastructure Committee, go look at a lot of the BSIP things, papers there, because that does draw out a lot on the usage of the bus network and the ambitions for that. Sorry, Councillor French.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's not a question. I understand it is the combined authority recently gave £40 million to Stagecoach for the new bus services. In Fenland, there's no mention of Fenland. Fenland, once again, appears to be the poor neighbour. We were informed at Fenland 10 days ago that the Stagecoach are cutting 3 of our buses. They gave notice 70 days ago, but we weren't informed until 10 days ago, and they didn't even know the date the 70 days actually came in. And we were informed that we're losing 3 bus services on the 25th of this month. Fenland is a poor relation, and it's time you start to recognise we are part of Cambridge County Council. We are council taxpayers, including the precept that the Mayor put in. So I think you really need to start looking to see how you're going to help us. Our roads are terrible, our transport's terrible. You know, please remember Fenland is part of county.
I have to say, Councillor French, that does slightly confuse me because, of course, Fenland is part of the county. And of course, it is something we care about an awful lot with the bus service. I think all of us here understand the huge requirements to increase the bus service. I know the Mayor is passionate about all of that as well and improving the bus service. It is the county as a whole that needs all of this work. We all have issues with Stagecoach. We all know that they have cut services to so many areas that so many people are so reliant on, that I think that's why all of this is vital. And it's vital that we improve our bus service and our public transport. But anyway, do I come to other members who have anything?
If I can just come back, I understand what you're trying to do, but we are the poor relations, and to be given short notice that we're losing 3 bus services on the 25th of this month.
Councillor Dupre, I'm sure you can tell about other places that have lost bus services as well.
Yes, Fenland is not alone in that, but I'm somewhat surprised that that is apparently being used as an argument to say that this process is deficient or shouldn't be happening. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. The point that Stagecoach can pull the rug from under communities that I live in, as well as communities that Councillor French and her colleagues live in and other members around this table live in. The point that they can do that with 6 weeks notice is exactly why we are trying to go down this route to provide some stability to bus services. Ever since the bus services outside London were deregulated, they have been in the hands of the private operators who can do what they like. And if they decide that they're not making enough money, they can come to the local authority with their begging bowl, as they do frequently. And it is exactly to avoid that situation, to put public transport on a firm footing where it has at least some funding and is reliable. And if it is reliable, people will rely on it and start to use it. One of the reasons people don't use buses, lack of ridership, is that they don't feel that the bus service is going to be there from 1 month to the next. And I've experienced that in the village I live in. That is not unique to Fenland, but indeed it is exactly the reason why this whole process is happening, to provide stability, certainty of funding, increase in funding, so that people can be encouraged onto public transport, not only for environmental reasons, although that's really important, but also for the social reasons. And I will mention here that we've had mention of the results of the consultation. The strongest support for the proposals in the consultation came from younger people and very much older people. And the strongest opposition to the proposals came from people bluntly of the average age around this table. Now, I don't just have a duty to 64-year-olds in comfortable villages. I have a duty, and we all have a duty, I would submit, to pay attention to the needs of the young people who can't get to the education facility of their choice, can't do the course of study of their choice, can't potentially pursue the career of their choice, simply because there is no way in which they can access the education facility or training provider that provides that. We also need to have consideration for the very much older people in our communities whose health is failing, whose eyesight is failing, who are isolated, alone, and unable to access not just services like shopping and dentistry and so on, but also the basic need that we all have to be social and to meet friends, to go and see people, to have company. And all of those things are really important. And the younger and older people who have responded to the survey are telling us in very clear language that that's what they need. And we have a duty to think about that. We have a very, very complex system of governance, and it's really messy. And I'm also surprised that Councillor French talked about what you're going to do about this. What are you doing about this? This isn't you. We are only part of a much bigger picture. The consultation wasn't our consultation. It was the consultation of the Greater Cambridge Partnership. We are a part of that, but it is the partnership's consultation, not the county councils. We are the Highways Authority. The combined authority is the Public Transport Authority, and the GCP has the money. And that's the position that we are in. The GCP area also has the problem of congestion, which it needs to solve one way or another. And there's congestion now, but there's sure as hell's going to be congestion in the future with all that building around Cambridge and 2 new hospitals coming and all the rest of it. And those are things we've got to solve, and solving that isn't easy. If it was really easy, we wouldn't be having meetings and reports, we would just be doing it. Everybody knows that if you ask people, do you want this? They'll say yes. Do you want to pay for it? They'll say no. That's the way the world works. And what we've got to do, what our duty is to balance those two things. How do we provide transport that's attractive, usable, convenient, and affordable for people who need it and people who want to use it as an alternative to the car? And how do we do that in a way that is fair? Now, I have been on record since, August last year at least, saying that I don't believe that the proposals as they were consulted on late last year were the right ones. And I stick by that. I've read the feedback summary. I know what people said and how they felt about it. So we've got to find a way that enables us to achieve those objectives around better public transport in a way that is fairer than was being suggested in those proposals. And that's not only interest for people who need that public transport and currently have no public transport at all. It's in the interests of everybody, because we've got to achieve our climate objectives. We've got to reduce congestion. We've got to reduce dependence on public transport, which means we've got to provide people with alternatives. This isn't a paper for decision, but what it's setting out is the aim, the goal, the options for getting there, including other sources of funding, and who is responsible for doing what. And I would encourage people who still seem confused about that to go and read the paper again and perhaps have some clarity, because they will need that clarity in order to make the decisions that many people in Cambridgeshire, across the whole of Cambridgeshire, are relying on us to make.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Dupre. Does anybody else have any? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of comments. I'm still a bit confused as to why this is coming towards us, coming to us today, but still that's by the by. It mentions in the paper, it mentions the local transport connectivity plan. Obviously, that's not been agreed yet by the board, as I understand, by the combined authority board. I understand there's still issues with that. And going back to the mayor came in when I was on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee 2 years ago, and I remember him coming to us and saying, there's 3 words he wanted, well, apart from the 3 C's, the compassion, and I forget the other 2, but he came to us and said, it's all about buses, buses and buses. And sadly, at the moment, it's no buses, no buses, no buses, as Councillor French has said. I had an interview with the team who are looking at the BSIP a couple of weeks ago in East Cams with Councillor Bailey, the leader. So we did input into the process. I've only recently gone on to the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, and I'm yet to see anything concrete. I think we are where we are, but I think it's been too slow, to be quite honest. And going back to the point about, I think the point that Councillor French was made, and I apologise if I've got it wrong, is that the combined authority knew 70 days before Fenland were told 10 days ago. So there was no communication, and we had the same situation in September. I first became aware of it. It was I turned my social media off on the day of the Queen's funeral, and the following morning I opened my laptop and had dozens of emails and notifications because Stagecoach had announced it on that Monday. But I understand the CPCA knew a long while before. Whether that's because for commercial reasons, confidentiality, they couldn't announce that, but I think it didn't help in terms of delaying getting something done. Additionally, East Cams, we did submit a bus plan. Admittedly, it was submitted, I think it was pre-COVID actually, but it still probably holds together. But I'd be interested to see that being put into the paper. Moving on, I take, well, I'm going to disagree slightly with Councillor Dupre, because a lot of the people who are the demographics in there are taxpayers who don't want to pay any more charges. They've paid enough. And I'd be interested to know, amongst the 16 to 24-year-olds, yes, they live in the city, but they live in here for probably 3 years, is how many students are in there, students compared to residents. And yes, we've got congestion now. Some of that's caused by roadworks, but I'm interested in the comment that GCP has the money. So if they've got the money, why are they looking at charges? Moving on to some comments about the potential changes to the charging zone. Reduction is removing Adam Brooks from the charging zone. I think most of us would agree with. And then there are 3 or 4 items in there, or 5 items in there that talks about exemption for hospital patients, low income discount, exemptions for unpaid carers, charity workers, and out commuters near the boundary. Now, I see the administration workload of actually administering all of that quite horrendous, personally. So it defeats the object, in my opinion. And obviously, it must impact on the financial business case, which I've really yet to see an actual business case come forward. And then finally, I mean, it's obviously going to come to county council at some stage in the future, presumably for full debate and decision. But as I understand it, no political party sat around this table actually stood for election on a mandate to impose this charge on the public. Yes, we want more buses, and I remember pre-consultation, I spoke to both the chief exec and the transport director and said, let's have a consultation that doesn't have leading questions. There were leading questions in that consultation because most of us will tick the box. Do you want more buses? If you say you want more buses, but you may have to pay for it, blah blah blah, then you might get a different answer. And I think that's why you've got the polar of 70% saying more buses and then 58% saying they don't want to pay a charge. It's trying to get a measured response, and I don't believe that consultation did that. But those are my thoughts on it, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. I won't abuse my discretion to come back at you with some of the points on that one, but I'll move to Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. We all know about the fixation of the mayor when he's at work about buses, but there's a very important consideration that I think is slipped over in this paper, or not ignored, but not given insufficient weight, and that is improving rail services, because certainly for the area I represent, which is the north of the county, in reopening that March to Wisbech line would be absolutely crucial. And I would really have welcomed something in this paper about how we're going to effectively lobby Network Rail and the government to actually reopen that line. It's absolutely essential for the connectivity of Cambridgeshire. And again, I have to come back to what I think is the somewhat misleading title of this paper as it stands, about improving connectivity in Cambridgeshire. And if it was serious about that, there would certainly be more about reopening that rail link from March to Wisbech. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. I think we can all agree on the importance of rail as well as part of this. Councillor Coutts.
Just a very short comment there to pick up a question about leading questions and so on. Many years as a teacher taught me that if you have student debates about stopping homework or not having to wear uniform, you know the condition, the answers you're going to get. Of course, the argument works exactly the same way, as Councillor Dupre points out. If you ask people, do they want to pay more money for something, they will always answer no. It's our job to balance up the desires of people for better transport with the fact that it has to be paid for in some way, and try and find the most efficient, effective and equitable way of doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Coutts. Councillor King.
Chair, I really can't let that stand. You know, the people that we represent are not idiots. And there is a certain amount of truth in what Councillor Coutts says. But for most people, they are able to make that assessment of pain versus gain. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why consistently putting more money into the NHS is widely supported by people, even though it will affect their pockets. So, you know, if we are going to do something like this, and, you know, the congestion charge is not something I support, I remain to be, you know, convinced. There's a lot of convincing that has to be done to get me to support it. But, you know, it's our job to persuade our constituents of what we're doing will provide more gain than pain. And that's the equation that most people make in their daily lives. And, you know, I don't think we ought to just dismiss it as, you know, NIMBYism.
I don't think anybody is dismissing any of the comments made in the consultation, Councillor King, and I don't think that's right. Councillor Hunt.
Yes, I listened with great interest to Councillor Dupre and Councillor Coutts, and both of them said, of course, if you ask the right questions, you get the answers you want. And seriously, if you tell a child you don't have to do homework tonight, what do you think? Then yes, you know what the answer is going to be. However, my concern is that this proposal pays a lot of weight and puts weight on the opinion of people when they said they wanted better bus services. And now we're saying, look, the people want better bus services. Well, of course, it's plainly obvious they would. And I mean, the more you offer people for a lower price, the more they're going to want it. But then to rely on it as part of your proposal, I think is deceitful. I think it was deceitful in the first place to ask some of those questions because you knew what the answers were going to be. And they were loaded questions. But now to rely on them, I think, is really disingenuous, and we should be aware of it. And I don't need to be told about the obvious things. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, going on to a different topic slightly, with regard to cycleways, I would have liked to have seen in this report greater emphasis on cycleways, particularly in rural areas. You know, my residents in West Huntingdonshire would love to be able to cycle into St Neots but this condition of the B645 and other roads is not conducive to cycling, but we do not get there's no measures seen in here with regard to how we could improve cycling along our rural routes, and we've got no information here with regard to bus services in West Hunts or anywhere like that. I have, with the mayor, been out on the new Ting bus, and I've been round my villages trying to get people aware of that particular service. Now, it needs more buses, I'm sorry, but 4 buses is not sufficient to run a service, on-demand service, in such a wide area to get people into the likes of St Neots or Huntingdon from the rural areas. So the only way we're going to get that to work better and to get people out of their cars from rural areas is to put more on-demand bus services in place.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Just to come back on sort of your things on cycling there, I actually spent the weekend in Huntingdon, so I'm highly aware of how much more active travel routes is needed around there. Obviously, this hasn't been broken out here, but as a administration, I think it's fair to say we're quite passionate about active travel. And there have been many papers in the past on our active travel strategies, our local cycling and walking infrastructure plans, and all of the other things to do that. We do now have our Active Travel Centre of Excellence starting up, which is good and will help us to deliver more of that, because you are completely correct there, that if we are going to get people out of their cars, we need to give them viable options, be that more Ting buses, better active travel routes, or any of the other things that will help them actually have other options than having to drive in their car all the time.
I'll just come back on that. I fully agree with what you've said, Chair, but in West Hunts, there are no active travel plans in the rural areas to get people out of their cars onto cycling. We have got one, Tilbrook to Kimbolton, but that is the only one, but we've got no funding for that yet. So what I would like to see is a actual plan whereby we can have, you know, routes, cycling routes across West Hunts and in the rural areas and other rural areas, whether that be in East Cambs, Fendon or wherever, so that people can get out of their cars. But at the moment, I'm not seeing that.
Thank you. I don't want to get too parochial in this meeting. It should, hopefully, I'm going to look to Dave and say that it should be in the LC whip. That is the plan for all of those cycling and walking infrastructure plans. There is a huge network of those different routes that are required. And obviously, I mean, I don't think anybody thinks that we don't need those. And to come back to the point earlier about Fenland, obviously Fenland has some of the lowest car ownership levels in the entire county outside of Cambridge, has some of the highest levels of active transport. So therefore it is important that all across the county we get those routes, be they in the rural areas, be they in the villages, be they in the towns, be they in the cities. Active travel is so important to all of the transport across the county. Next, Councillor MacDonald, I believe.
Thanks, Chair. So I read this paper through a number of times. So my feeling was that, you know, it's not the finished article, but it is a stage in the process. I've tried to read this alongside the local transport and connectivity plan from the Combined Authority. So when I'm looking at this paper, I'm seeing from the Combined Authority an umbrella policy and a programme. And it was a shame recently that Peterborough opposed that long-term connectivity plan, I would assume for political reasons, but perhaps Bill or Simon or Alan could inform me about that. I think the BSIP and franchising is potentially key to this whole strategy and approach. We have a stagecoach provision in the county, obviously owned by private equity. They need to make a return and make a profit. And it's part of the solution, but it's not an entire solution. And that's why we see some of the things that, for example, Jan mentioned occurring in the county. I think the connectivity that the GCP has envisaged through making connections is key. for me, it's to be really celebrated that we see the first, what I call London-style transport map in Cambridgeshire. In other words, we've got real connectivity across rail, road, bus, guided bus, etc. I do agree with, I think it was Simon that said that the rural travel hubs and the rail connectivity is very important, so that we make the most of what we've got, because we've got established stations. I know he was calling for, you know, in March, the connectivity of the rail in March. I'm sure that's been looked at. Park and ride improvements are part of the quick wins. It's slightly referred to in the paper. Obviously, that's very much Cambridge focused. But we've seen already with the introduction of the electric buses, a cleaner, quieter buses, and just a better experience overall from the park and ride, which is to be welcomed. I found it sad that some of the opposition members have opposed on-demand bus services. You know, these have been trials in St. Neots. They may not be perfect. It's the first Uber for buses that we've seen in the county, but it is a great potential innovation. And it's a pity that that has been opposed, and hopefully they won't be opposed entirely in the future. I think the Making Connections consultation, clearly it doesn't have all the answers, but it's trying to make improvements. And what we see in this paper, compared to what was in the original proposals for Making Connections, is already significantly different. I think Simon is right about the bus uptake. There's no point in having a bus service unless the user experience is good and the total number of users is going to increase significantly. So that is something we need to think about in the future. Even though we're not the Transport Authority, it is something that we should think about. Bill referred again and again to the Making Connections consultation and the feedback. And I think Councillor Dupre has already referred to it. And I would say to Bill, what part of we don't support the proposals as they currently stand does Bill not understand? That's already been stated multiple times in South Cambs and East Cambs, and we've seen improvements or enhancements and changes to the original proposals already. So what about funding and funding mechanisms? So I was very pleased to see in the paper that other funding mechanisms are being considered, whether it's workplace parking levy, whether it's direct contribution from businesses or developers, such as happens with the youth service in Cambridge at the moment. And again, the paper has started to look at these things and think about those as part of the Making Connections proposals. That's a big step forward. Homeschool transport is mentioned in the paper as it's a key consideration. And this, as we know from the county, is a very large budget, and it's right that it should be considered in the paper. And finally, one thing that is mentioned, but perhaps not elaborated on, is fairness in any ultimate charging that might or might not come in Cambridge. For example, in London, as many of us will know, you can be exempted from the charge if you're in receipt of universal credit. And that may be something that we consider as part of the ongoing discussions. So, look, this paper, as I said at the start, it's not the finished article. It's part of the process. I think it covers, 90% of the bases in terms of trying to integrate what we've got at the combined authority level with the local connectivity. So in that sense, I do welcome it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Coutts. Oh, thank you. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I had to come back on a couple of things, and Councillor McDonald's just reminded me. I think in terms of Ting, as I understand it, it's a very expensive service at the moment in terms of cost. And obviously, as Councillor Gardiner says, we do need more passengers. It was certainly something that we in East Cambs pushed for to be the trial, because I think it's got to go from a county-wide point of view. Demand responsive buses or whatever has got to become in the rural, in the extreme rural areas, has got to be the option, because you're not going to be able to have, one bus every hour going through a small village and with one passenger picked up. That's not realistic. But there's 2 points I really wanted to touch on. One was obviously the LC whip. And yes, we're getting lots of schemes on that, but I think the problem is, and again, it was touched on by Councillor Gardner, obviously in the rural areas, they're much more expensive because of the journey distance between village A to village B. So if people can't travel by cycle because of the risk or whatever, then obviously we need the bus service to get them out of their cars. So there needs to be looking at demand responsive transport, and I do find that the paper is very Cambridge centric. I mean, I've got one. There's a bus group in my ward, or just outside my ward, but it covers my ward, who have certainly been talking, I know, to the bus companies about trying to get a fast service from some of the villages into Cambridge, because that would then get commuters out of their cars rather than the bus going through every village, stopping at every stop and taking a fair bit longer. If they could get a fast service in, that would encourage people who work in the centre of Cambridge to actually get out the car. They can get on the bus, and it takes half an hour to get in instead of, right, excluding them getting stuck in traffic, but it will take a lot less time for them to get in and get about their daily journey. So hopefully that will come to fruition at some stage, but certainly that I know they're in discussion. And I take the point about obviously alternative funding, but I know certainly from what I've seen, business are not keen on some of the proposals. Certainly some of the comments I've seen, I've not done I don't know how representative that is, to be fair. I've just seen some of the comments. And the other thought around the zone is that, and I've certainly got neighbours who do it, is there are a lot of private schools in Cambridge, attracting people from around the village. I've got a couple of people in my village whose children go there. And obviously for them to physically get in at a certain time in the morning and then go off to work or wherever they're going, at the moment, and I'm not sure how a public transport system would actually enable them to do that without getting in the car. So and we obviously don't want to stop those great educational institutions that we've got, which really make Cambridge better. So that's another issue which I'm not sure is really coming into. I've not seen picked up in the paper, but thank you. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to say that Cambridge doesn't have a good bus service at all. Buses don't turn up. For an hour, we all waited for a bus. No buses whatsoever. People were late for work, hospital appointments. And when it came, 3 came all at once, which to me is such a waste of money. Where were them buses? The bus we use goes from Milton all the way to Addenbrooke's Hospital. It's a very important service, but they cut it all the time. So you can't, you can't really say, right, I'll get that bus and I'll know I'll be at my appointment early, because they're all cancelled. One good thing, I have been on the electric buses. They are using electric buses in Cambridge. They're very good, got 2 wheelchair spots, but only 1 spot's marked up. So that's something that's really got to be looked at. The other thing is community transport. We've got Dial-A-Ride and things like that. We need to look at that, and that needs putting in the paper. That the Dial-A-Ride service could be used for people that perhaps can't get on a bus. And get concession there. I think they do get a small concession, but not much. So I think it's nearly £4 to go on Dial-A-Ride, which is expensive when the bus is only £2. So I think there are definitely issues we need to look at for the elderly and disabled. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Good points there. Councillor Daunton.
Thank you.
Yes, so I can concur with Councillor Budd that not all areas of the city are well served by buses, not at all. But I want to speak up for the people who don't have cars and who can't drive and who really need the buses, not just in the city, but in my area, which is basically a rural division close to Cambridge, and we have really in parts of it no bus service at all. So if you're elderly or you don't own a car, or you're under the age to drive a car, you're completely isolated. You can be completely isolated. I think it's really important that we speak up for those people who are not in a position to own a car or drive. And I really want those voices to be heard. I just had a footnote to what Councillor MacDonald said about the park and ride facilities. I think we could do a lot more now to improve the park and ride facilities, and I do see them as an important part of this plan. But I think before the plan is put into effect, we could look at what we're offering now and perhaps make improvements there. And again, on the bus service, that the electric buses, yes, they have been introduced, they are being used, and I think they do make a difference. And it's interesting looking at the increasing usage from the park and ride that I use since the introduction of the electric buses.
Thank you, Councillor Daunton. I am going to try and wrap this up soon. So I'm going to take Councillor Gardner, sorry, but then I'll leave it to people that haven't spoken because we have been going for quite a while on this one. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. I totally agree with what Councillor Daunton said. What I would also like to add is when we bring out a service like the Ting service, if it wasn't for myself going out with the operator and going round the villages, nobody would know about the service. So we need to get better at our advertising of the service throughout where it is operating. As I say, I went round a whole day twice now with the Ting bus service to get it known about. Otherwise, nobody knew about it. Then we had Stagecoach operated it in the first case. Then it changed to Vector. Now, what residents were not aware, because they had different apps, Stagecoach had one app, Vector had another. Residents weren't aware that they changed. So therefore they were still trying, because it said Ting, they were still trying to order the bus on the original Ting app, but they couldn't do it because it changed to Vector. So we do need to try and get our communications to residents and things like that very much better. And that is why I have spent days trying to get the service, publicising the service.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you. Just one sentence. I appreciate what Councillor Gardner has said, but the public transport authorities, the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority, not this council.
Thank you. I'm sure we're all aware of that. Councillor Shaler.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. And thanks again to Councillor Gardner for taking part. This is a trial and, it is an experiment and we are learning. And I think all of these things are part of the solution, not necessarily the whole solution. Something Councillor King said earlier on about Wisbech Rail resonates very much, I think, on every single CPCA Transport and Infrastructure Committee for the last 2 years or more. I have mentioned Wisbech Rail, and driving here today, this morning, because there is no train station, there is no other option than to drive. And this is something about the lack of strategic transport planning. But I was noticing all of the containers on lorries on the road. And again, less than a third of the containers that come from the largest container port in the country to the east of us go by rail. And so strategic rail, absolutely. But this is not part of this particular paper. But be assured that on the combined authority in every which way, we are looking at rail enhancement is absolutely key. The other things to mention, across the UK, we have 17% of the population are rural. In this county, it is 47%. We are very much a rural county, and it's about rural transport poverty. And I think we can all agree here that the privatized model of that is run by Stagecoach has not provided the kind of transport that we need. In order to change that, we need to franchise the system in some way or another. Now, franchising is complicated, but we need to have control, and it would be better that the profits, where there are profits in the system, are not siphoned off to, in this case, German banks, but to profit-making enterprises if they were brought back into the system. And I think we can all agree on that. We want to move more people around. One of the things that we talked about, well, several people have been focusing just on the Cambridge and the Greater Cambridge area. One of the reasons for this paper was it was to integrate with the entirety of Cambridgeshire and all of the ambitions that we have. This is the beginning. We'll move further. In terms of the Greater Cambridge Partnership, that consultation for that particular model was rejected by the GCP board. It was rejected at the GCP assembly. Nobody is pushing anything through. This is an ongoing process, and I want to make that very, very clear. In terms of charging, if we end up doing any kind of road user charging at all, it's going to change clearly. But one thing to note about the consultation, there was only 17% of the respondents, of all of those respondents, rejected any kind of road user charging at all. So there's a lot of information in there, but of course, this is a process, and we will get something that works as much as possible for everybody. In terms of rural connectivity, I wanted to say another thing about people saying getting commuters out of their cars. As I think Councillor Daunton said, it's not only getting people out of their cars, it's about providing transport for people who otherwise do not have any. And even in the areas where there is the highest level of car ownership in Finland, 21% of households do not have access to a car. But it's also about allowing people to be retained in those areas, supporting those rural communities and families, also allowing people to move to those areas where there is a possibility of transport. And I will finish on the last point about the GCP money to support buses. This is finite. The possibility is there to support buses for 2-3 years. We will not be able to get bus companies to sign up to a long-term franchising deal without long-term money coming in to support them. But this is very much about rural transport poverty, education, and getting people to hospitals across the county. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shaler. Now, I am very much aware that we've been going for an hour already and we have 8 items on our agenda, and I really don't want to be here in 8 hours' time. Councillor Sharp, I know you've spoken quite a lot of times
Very
previously, but I'll let you come
quickly,
again just quickly, please.
I apologise if I misheard Councillor Shaler, but he said there's only 17% totally opposed. If I look at 4.43, it certainly there's 58 who either oppose or strongly oppose. So I just wanted to correct that, unless I'm misheard him. No.
Very quickly, Councillor Shaler.
Yeah, sorry, the 58% opposed that current scheme in its entirety. Other questions looked at were there changes that would then allow people to support some form of charging. And so the ones who were against charging of any kind under any circumstances was 17%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaler. Right, I'm going to try and wrap this up. Thank you very much for the debate here. I know this is the first time this has really come to the County Council, and it's really good to see this come together. Councillor Hunt, is this dire?
Oh, quick, Chair. It was just in relation to the demand responsive scheme, which, as you know, was extended by officers without the proper CA authority. Look at the costs that are being already coming through, and you'll see that it is just unsustainable. The demand responsive thing will be too expensive and very, very, very expensive. And although it's an ideal and which a lot of my villagers would love, I think it is a dream in a pipe. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I mean, I do find interesting that Councillor Gardner's calling for more ting and you're saying that's then too expensive and that we can't have as much of it. But let's try and wrap this up though. So firstly, yes, thank you to officers for bringing this paper together. We do, to quote, I think it's Peter, live in a very rich governance environment here. And I really do recommend people read this paper if they have not, those online and everywhere else. This is a very good paper actually bringing together all of the different threads that are the responsibilities of so many different people. Only a very small part of this is actually the responsibility of us here at the County Council, a very important part, but a very small part. But it's really good to see all of this come together in one area and have it all thoroughly explained. So thank you very much for that. There's been some really good points raised here about different age ranges and their response to this consultation. Obviously, there are a lot of young that cannot drive and that possibly won't ever end up driving. I have a 5-year-old and I'm not convinced she'll ever end up actually learning to drive with the way things go. And we see the cost of motoring that has spiraled. I mean, my car insurance, I just renewed it last week, has gone up by 50%. I was talking to another lower income worker, hers has gone up by 50% as well. The actual cost of car ownership now is becoming phenomenal. And we see that with the access to cars that people have. Fenland having, as we've said before, one of the lowest levels of car ownership in the entire county outside of the city. And in no small part, that's because of the cost of motoring. So we all have to understand what pressures are on people right now, and that we need to give those that are currently unable to afford a motor car a way to actually get around and be able to do things. We can't block those people from society. So I think all of this public transport improvement is so important, and it's been good to hear people being so passionately in support of buses, and perhaps slightly scathing of our current bus system and our current bus operators. And to me, at least, I do believe that it is vital that our bus services are run in the interests of the people in this county, not in the interests of profit holding shareholders. I think we've all seen in our own areas the effects of poor public transport. Councillor French, as you were saying about bus services being cut and the amount of distress that causes our local residents, it's massive. Councillor Bird, buses not turning up. I hear that all the time, and it is so challenging, and it means that people cannot rely on those bus services, and therefore they end up having to buy a car and using that instead because of an unreliable bus service. I know myself today, it's almost impossible for me to get here by bus, despite living in the centre of Cambridge. Getting into our own council offices by bus is practically impossible, which is just utterly ridiculous that all of us here have been forced to drive. Is there anybody here that didn't drive today? Councillor Daunton, yes, you were the only one. And now I'm having to give you a lift home afterwards because of that. So I think that just goes to show how few of us are actually able to get around on public transport, and how therefore important it is that we have good public transport, be that bus, tram, train, whatever else. It is so vitally important to all of us, which is why, while I understand this, all of this change brings such uncertainty to people and worry, it is so vitally important. And I do thank the Greater Cambridge Partnership for all of the work that they have been doing on it, despite the fact that I know it is incredibly challenging and bringing such worry to so many people. I also I don't think anybody's commented on this. The GCP has been doing a lot of work on automation. I think it's 18 million that's coming to bus automation trials around Greater Cambridge at the moment, and to see how that comes forwards in years to come, I think will be incredible. And I think when we talk about the costs of Ting and how Ting is currently quite expensive in its trial form, I think we see a route in the future to on-demand buses being actually far more cost effective, and how all of that links in together. So I think what we have to think about with all of this is that we are designing a transport system here, not for today. not for today. This is a transport system that needs to work for decades into the future, and it needs to react to the changing transport environment that we have as the future comes. Being to San Francisco last year, it's amazing to see how many automated Google cars are driving around without even a safety driver behind the wheel, with literally nobody in it. There is no doubt in my mind that change is coming to transport and the way that we get around, be it because of climate change, be it because of automation. The world is changing, and we are going to need to react to that as we go forwards. So thank you very much for everyone on all of this. I think it's been a really good debate. I think it's the first time this has fully come to the County Council. So thank you for all of that. Now, the committee is asked to note the overall current strategic objectives of the council and its partners for the improvement of public transport and connectivity for the county. Note the current activities and the implementation of the bus strategy in relationship between the City Deal programme and the bus reform model being advanced by the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. Note the results of the Greater Cambridge Partnership Making Connections consultation, and note that subject to identification of a preferred option, any future decisions will require the development of an outline business case that will be considered by full council in October 2023. Do I have any dissenters that do not wish to agree to that? Councillor Hunt. Okay, let's move to a vote those then. In that case, can I have those in favour of the motion? Hands up, please. Those abstaining? Abstaining. And those against? Okay, I believe that's passed. Thank you very much, everybody. Let's move on to our next agenda item, which is item 5. Which is the procurement of civil parking enforcement services. I'd like to introduce Phil Harmer via Zoom. Hello, Phil. Parking Operations Manager, who will present this item. Over to you, Phil.
Hello. Firstly, apologies for not attending in person. I've got a slight infection of the foot, which is healing, and I will be active very soon. But yeah, I apologise again. Hopefully, this paper is fairly straightforward. Our civil enforcement contract is absolutely the central building block of what we do for parking enforcement. The main provision is for civil enforcement officers who basically obviously walk the streets, issuing penalty charges and completing work like that. They also issue all the works related to camera enforcement, such as bus lanes, and hopefully in the near future, TMA6 sites. And they also deal with suspensions and other activities on the street. We're in a bit of a challenging time with contracts. Looking around at the market, things are getting more and more challenging. Current incumbents, OCS Legion, have just changed ownership, which I don't see as being absolutely positive at the moment, but we'll see how that goes. The fundamental thing we really need to do now is make a full assessment of where we want to be in the future and what resources we need. Obviously, things are changing. I mean, Councillor Beckett's mentioned how many things are changing. One of the key things for us is we're obviously moving into South Cambs very soon. We kind of got that covered and we're working on that, getting that sorted out. Traffic Management Act's Part 6 powers are coming to us. We should have those by the end of July. Major events going on. So the main thing we need now is, in real terms, is buy some time to actually kind of look at the options for the future. We need to make sure our next procurement or our next decision is actually meets all of our requirements for foreseeable future. We will be looking at a long-term solution, so we need to make sure we're in the right place. So the paper, I think, is fairly straightforward. We're just looking for a basic recommendation so we can get on with the job and find out the best way forward for the County Council.
Thank you, Philip, and I hope your foot gets better soon. Members, I think rather than taking this as questions and debate, does any members have any questions or debate on this all at the same time? Councillor King, I always look at you first.
And I'm flattered, Chair, and I shall remember you in my will. Which might not.
Do I need to declare that as an interest or not?
Well, you might need to. But no, I just had a question about how this might affect the ongoing CPE process, which is currently working its slow way through. So will this have any impact upon CPE going to other areas of the county? Thank you.
We've already investigated covering South Cam, so we're covered with that. With any extensions, that's fine. Essentially, with HDC are looking at their own agenda, in which case we will build in options in the future for any potential implications that happen. And Fenland are looking at their own way of progressing as well. So we will build in for all those considerations, but we fundamentally respect the right of all the districts to make their own decisions on what direction they're going to go.
Sorry, Chair, I'm slightly confused.
Sorry.
So will this actually have any impact upon the rollout of CP to other districts?
No. We will continue as we do. We will roll out to South Cambs, and the other districts will act as they choose to. So it won't
That is
impact on them.
Absolutely clear, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor King. Anybody else? Go on then. Sorry.
Chair, I'm slightly confused as to how long this contract is due to go. In the recommendation, it says as to meet operational demands from the 1st of August 2024 for a period of up to 1 year. But presumably we're looking for a much longer period of contract. And is that not within this recommendation at the time? Thank you.
No, right. We're towards the tail end of this contract. So we potentially have another year left. What we're saying is we'd like to build in the option for 2 years to basically get a full summary of the market and the environment. So the option will be with us at how long we extend it within that 2-year period. But ultimately, beyond 2 years, we have to make a decision on procurement or how we're going to deal with the service in the future.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Wilson. Does that answer your question, or do you want me to? Okay.
No, that's very helpful. I'd just be interested at some stage from somebody to answer, because it's a procurement issue, would this potentially go to the new Assets and Procurement Committee, or would we as experts on highways matters be asked to consider it? But that might be.
I think there will be a future procurement work being done, which will no doubt follow the procurement structure. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Touching on what Councillor Wilson's just said, obviously my reading of this is that it's a year's extension. Yes, I've got issues around the rollout and the time, but that's perhaps for another paper in terms of the issues there. But I'd forgotten about the new committee, because I was going to say if we're extending the contract till the end of July 2025, then we need a paper coming before us at a fair time before that, hopefully in conjunction with the rollout for Fenland, Huntingdonshire and South Cam, so it all tails in together. Yeah.
I think there's some slightly different issues there. If Fenland and Huntingdonshire decide to have their own civil parking enforcement officers not controlled by the county council, that will obviously be slightly separate. But yes, I would expect further to be coming down the line when we are ready to procure the service after this one ends. Anybody else? Councillor French, is that a hand up?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I don't have any problems with this paper, but what I will say, I am deeply disappointed with the assurance that I had from you and also Councillor MacDonald 2 years ago that we're still no further forward with the civil parking enforcement for Fenland. And I do understand it is a cost issue. I know it's not on this paper, but please, will you get this back onto this committee for consideration?
Thank you, Councillor French. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Phil, for the report. I've got big concerns about the officers that come out to check on people who are not parking right, especially by a school, which to me is very important. But when the officer comes along and just sits there and doesn't penalise the drivers that cause the problems. We've had 2 children now knocked over by cars at the school near me. So I'm just wondering, can anything be done, or what can we do to make sure they do give out the tickets?
Absolutely, Jerry. Contact me. We'll have a talk about specific areas and things like that. There may be limits on restrictions there and so on, but if we can do it, they should be doing it. And if they're not, I want to know about it, and I'll make sure it does happen.
Brilliant. Thank you, Philip. Anybody else wish to comment on this or ask a question? No? Okay, that's good. In that case, then, thank you very much for this paper, Philip. I do think it is important that we look at all the options going forwards and making sure that we do get the best civil parking enforcement officers that we can and the best value for money for all of us in terms of both social and economic goals. The committee is asked to, though, delegate the authority to extend the existing contract within the current contract terms and conditions to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability, that's you, Frank, in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the committee, and as required to meet operational demands from the 1st of August 2024 for a period of up to a year. And note, a report will be prepared in due course on the options for future procurement and seek a decision on the preferred approach. Can I take that by affirmation, or does anyone dissent? Brilliant. I see no dissent, so let's take that by affirmation. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. How are we doing on time? Let's keep going. Thank you, Philip. Item 6 presents us with the local highways improvements for the
Chair, before we start this next item, is there any chance of adjusting the heat? I'm finding it rather cold in here. I don't know if anybody else is.
I'm actually rather warm at this end, but maybe we can. It is quite a large. Is everyone else warm at this end and cold at that end? Maybe we can ask them to have a look at the temperature controls.
So perhaps there must be a zone control, I think, and so or alternatively we could swap around, Chair.
Of course, and I'm sure, will that promote me in your will or demote me?
Well, it might ensure that I survive longer from the cold spell.
Is that in my interest or not? Anyway, let's keep going. Item 6 presents us with the Local Highways Improvements 22-23 programme, and I'd like to invite Josh Rutherford, Group Manager Design and Delivery, to introduce this item. Josh, thank you very much for your work, and over to you.
Good morning, everyone. So the purpose of this report is to inform the committee of the outcome of the local highway improvement member panels and officer scoring of the complex and non-complex LHI applications for 23-24. This is the first year of the new process, which in general went well, with positive comments from members regarding the streamlined panel days for the complex LHIs. There are some areas to target for improvement, which will be discussed further in upcoming member working group sessions scheduled in July and August, in time for any proposals to come to H&T in October before the next application round reopens. We had 162 applications countywide, 46 complex, 116 non-complex. Of these, a total of 77 are proposed for progression, 18 complex and 59 non-complex. This is around 10 to 15 more than the average over the last couple of years. To ensure the full budget allocation is spent due to underspends in some districts, we have recommended that funding is reassigned to promote further schemes in other areas in Fenland and South Cambridgeshire. This is identified in items 2.10 and 2.11. We know that due to the finite amount of funding available, many applications won't be delivered this year, which will be disappointing to those applicants who have been successful. It should be noted that as well as LHI funding, we have also secured a total of 1.15 million to go towards 20-mile-an-hour projects countywide. £800,000 of this is from the Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority. This also includes a proposed increase in allocation to £350,000, up from £150,000 in year for the bottom-up 20-mile-an-hour application process, which we are currently assessing the applications of. This means we're delivering more for our local communities. The 20-mile-an-hour increase in funding is a paper that you will see later on today. This budget will equate to an extra 10 to 15 projects, dependent on size, which previously would have been delivered through the LHI programme. Lastly, the two recommendations are that members note the prioritised lists as attached for the 23-24 programme and delegate authority to approve these to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair, following a review of the moderated officer scoring for those applications in a non-complex process by the LHI member working group. And secondly, delegate to Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair to remove schemes that prove to be undeliverable and add new schemes in their place as outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh. And yes, I think it's important to note that at this moment, while there is an indication of what schemes will progress here, it is not finalised. And I know in particular in East Cambs, there are some slight questions over some of the schemes there and what will be progressed. Now, members, I do want to try and keep this away from being parochial. I know we all have our own schemes that we're all really passionate about, but obviously there are many members that are not in this room that don't have the chance to represent their own schemes. And I believe it would be unfair if we all start talking about our schemes and promoting those. So please do try and keep this about general larger issues or district-wide issues rather than being your own patch. But let me open this up for questions and debate. Councillor Daunton.
I'd really like to know what arrangements there will be.
Sorry, Councillor Daunton, can I stop you? I forgot there is actually a public question on this one first, which Dan just reminded me. Dan, can we come in? Do you have it to read, or is there? Okay. Okay, do you have the question to read? In that case, then would you read it out for us, the public question? Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Daunton.
Thank you, Chair. This question is from Mr. Mark Risen. Coldham's Lane in Romsey is a residential road that has long been neglected or even harmed in favour of both neighbouring residential roads and neighbouring ring roads. It suffers from a toxic combination of congestion and speeding and the consequent chemical and noise pollution. It was due to receive a modal filter as part of the active travel funding in the COVID area, but this funding was squandered, so active travel remains heavily discouraged. I understand that 4 proposals were put forward under the LHI scheme to provide partial relief, 2 zebras, a weight limit and a 20-mile-an-hour limit, and yet it seems Coldham Lane will get nothing. What has happened to these applications? It seems the weight limit application was withdrawn, but it's not clear by whom was it withdrawn or on what basis. Gilbert Road and Victoria Road, for example, have 1, so Coldham's Lane in Ramsey should also have 1. And the 20-mile-an-hour limit application has just vanished. Mill Road and Cherry Hinton Road both have 20-mile-an-hour limits. So Coldham's Lane in Romsey should have 1. We don't want to be promised some vague citywide scheme at an undefined point in the future, and that will be abandoned in the face of opposition from the motoring lobby, see congestion charge. We need action for Coldham's Lane in Romsey now.
Thank you very much, Dan. It's sad that Mark couldn't be here to ask that in person. I will ask officers to respond to it though, and I believe some things will be going as part of the 20-mile-an-hour scheme anyway, but I'll ask officers to respond to that one. We've also received a question from... Oh, sorry, David, do you want to respond now? Go on.
Yeah, just to provide some reassurance, the 20-mile-an-hour application has not vanished. It's been moved to the 20-mile-an-hour process as bids for 20-mile-an-hour limits aren't accepted through the LHI programme. Applicants will be updated on the prioritisation outcome later in the year, and a report will be prioritised list for delivery will go to October H&T. The cost for the zebra crossing applications exceeded the programme limit for the LHI fund by a considerable margin. Officers are currently working on alternative funding options, which have been discussed with the local member and other members in the LHI member working group. The weight limit application doesn't meet the current HGV policy due to existing site-specific issues. These will be discussed with the applicants in more detail via a constructive feedback session with officers in due course, and an email has been sent to the applicants explaining this.
Thank you very much, David. I know Coldham's Lane gets a lot of attention and it needs it with everything that's been going on there. We also have a question here from Councillor Bulat, which has been circulated. And Dan, would you be able to, Democratic Services Officer, would you be able to read that one as well, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is just comments rather than a question as such. So I would like to make 2 comments for the committee to consider in how best to improve the scheme for our residents in the next round. Firstly, we need better communications with the residents on those schemes. For example, in my division in Abbey, while one of the previous year's schemes had been completed, I had heard nothing about another scheme funded at the same time for the last months. Regular communications with local members and residents are essential to maintain trust in our services. Second, I would like to ask the committee members to consider how the LHIs we fund as a county can be better integrated with wider schemes. For example, one of the schemes proposed to be funded in my division is for parking restrictions in Riverside. This is an area of high public interest with several applications made in the past and failed parking schemes. Residents have been asking for a continuous footpath for over a decade, part of the Riverside vision approved by the City Council. At the same time, we have the GCP's Bottersham Greenway proposed to cross Riverside, as well as possible GCP East Riverside residents parking consultation soon. This is a good example of how we must coordinate all local projects better with the GCP developments, which have been progressing since the LHI application was submitted. However, I was pleased to see the changes in the LHI process this year, separating the schemes into complex and non-complex and streamlining decision-making. I think we're moving in the right direction, offering local residents more say over local improvements. I thank officers and the committee for all their work on this.
Thank you, Dan. I mean, yes, I think it's incumbent on me to say to start with that for £800,000 worth of budget, this gets so much local interest and is so important to so many of our residents in delivering these small schemes for them. Councillor Daunton, though, I'm very sorry to have cut you off earlier, but please, over to you.
Thank you for the paper, Josh, and thank you for your work. As you said, there will be people who will be communities disappointed in the outcome. And so my question is, what arrangements will be made for feedback, really constructive feedback to the disappointed communities?
Over to you, Josh.
Go on. Yeah, I think probably the form of the feedback can be discussed in the member working groups, but happy to provide constructive feedback to all applicants. I'm just conscious of the amount of time that will obviously take with 160 applications to feedback on. So we'll have to have a think about it, but I've made a note, taking it on board, and we'll do something.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton, do you want to come back again?
I do think it's really important, because what we don't want is people putting in applications time and again and being disappointed. I think to give that sort of help and reassurance so that the next time they can be successful.
Yes, I agree. I also think it's, again, another point that I want to make is that I don't think any of the unsuccessful schemes, or at least not very many, were actually bad schemes. Like, the fact that one was not successful doesn't mean that it was a bad scheme. It means that there were other schemes that ranked slightly higher than it. And that's the unfortunate thing, that we live in a very constrained funding environment. And I think actually, if we had the funding, we would probably have funded 98% of these because they're all very good schemes. So that's the really frustrating things with the LHIs, that we have so many parishes and community groups putting in really good schemes that we don't have the funding to be able to deliver them all. So please, I don't want parishes to take away from this that if they're unsuccessful, that it's necessarily a bad scheme. It just might be that there was another one that ranked higher in it this time. And my hope is that obviously if that scheme then gets implemented next time round, they will be towards the top of them. And I think as part of the working group, we do need to look at whether particularly high scoring schemes that were not successful could be automatically put into next year's round to be scored again, because obviously those that just fell short, there's a very high chance that they could be successful next year. But anyway, before, rather than me stealing on it, does anyone else have any comments they want to make? Sorry, Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Josh, for the paper. I'm just concerned about we had two in our area are non-complex schemes, and all they were two lampposts, and one was outside.
Councillor Bird, please, can we not keep this about our own local issues, but about the whole scheme in general?
I'm trying to explain. So anyway, so lampposts, are we not replacing them now? Because when there's areas where elderly live in flats and it's so dark at night, they're falling over. Can you tell me if we're going to get these lampposts or not?
I'm just quickly looking through the...
I don't think we should comment on a particular scheme, but I think we can say that I think some lampposts have been successful. And I know in the city there were some areas of lighting that were successful, but obviously different schemes are scored differently. So it might be that the ones in your area, Councillor Bird, didn't quite score highly enough.
We can share the moderated scoring, so officers scoring with you, so you can have that context of why they scored what they did. There's no problem with doing that. I can get a member of the team to contact you and share the scores, so you can kind of see where they maybe fell down compared to some of the others. I can share some above the line and some below, so you have that context.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Josh, for the report. Two quick questions, really. With regard to the complex schemes, I'm assuming all those schemes will go ahead now. They're not going to be moderated by the panel. And then finally, with regard to communication to other parishes, if they're not successful, we all as county councils, I have regular meetings with all my parishes, and I'm sure everybody else does in the room, to save your staff a considerable amount of, if you updated each parish council, each county council as to why a particular one didn't, that could then be forwarded on by that county councillor, which, you know, I always make regular reports to my parishes, so they would be expecting me to report back on that issue. So, you know, I'm quite happy to report back on your behalf.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Josh, did you want to come back on that at all?
No, just thanks for the offer.
I do think as well that the scoring that we've had with the non-complex and complex scheme, sharing that is often actually a good way to demonstrate why a scheme hasn't been successful, and to see where it fell down and what it did not score highly on. So please, all councillors do take a look at the scores. Councillor Dawnstein, to your point, is to explain to parishes why they're not successful. Looking at the scores will be the clue as to why you're not successful, and then perhaps following that up with further questions to say, why did I not score highly in that criteria? That's often the best way to dig into why a scheme wasn't successful. Councillor Dupre, I believe you're next on my list.
Thank you. I think to say I'm not happy with this year's round would be an understatement. This process is always a catalogue of disappointment, and that's inevitable because there is far more demand from communities than there is supply of resources, both financial resources to put schemes in the ground and staff resources to moderate and manage all of the process. And I don't underestimate the load of that process on Josh and his team. So it is a competitive process, so there will be losers as well as winners, and communities will be extremely invested in the schemes that they have put forward. They mean a lot to them. This is really, in many ways, the only way in which communities can shape the highways within their area. So therefore, it is obvious that it's going to be very significant, and that the disappointment when it comes will be very crashing. It's despite the issue about demand and supply, it's been very interesting to note that the demand has not been evenly spread at all this year, astonishingly disproportionate, with very, very few applications from East Cambridgeshire, slightly more from Fenland, and a huge influx of applications that it's just simply not possible to meet from Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire. And I think it's worth us spending a little time trying to get to the bottom of why that is. I suspect that one of the issues will be that just sense of having been beaten into the ground by failure, having put so much into a bid in terms of time and energy and emotional resource and commitment, only then to find it knocked back, and perhaps knocked back again the subsequent year. There may well be other reasons. I have to say, in my own division, which I'm not going to talk about, the experience has been much more mixed. There are winners as well as losers. But I am concerned at some of the things that have happened this year that I don't think I've seen happen in previous years. The first one is that I'm hearing from some colleagues that communities in their area are being told, congratulations, well done, your scheme was really good and scored really highly, but by the way, we're going to ask you to shell out another £8,000 or £10,000 to make it happen. And we can't control the rate of inflation and everything else that's going on in the economy of this country. Any more than the government appears to be able to, but there you go. But that's really, really not a position we want to be putting communities in. Some of the successful communities may have money to spare, I doubt it. Some of them are very small communities who nonetheless do an awful lot of work to put a really good scheme forward and haven't got that kind of room for maneuver in their finances in a small community. So that I don't think I've come across before, and that may just be the economic situation. It may be something different to that. The other thing I wanted to point out, though, was the really, really, really poor communication around some of the schemes. Some schemes were completely airbrushed out of the report, as if and treated as if they had never existed, which is unacceptable. Some communities were promised responses in writing to their concerns. They were told early on that for some reason their scheme wasn't going to be progressed, and that was written down as being scheme withdrawn. And I think we do need to look at what withdrawn means, and that's a comment that's been made in the public questions. But that is it's just unacceptable that parishes are treated in that way, promised communications that never arise, given communications orally that are confusing or unclear, and that there's no opportunity to be absolutely clear about what's gone on, and are still not written to, even now, with any detail of why their application failed, or wasn't even considered. And that, again, is not something I've come across before. And I think there are some real issues with this year's process that we need to bottom out, because that I've been in this place now for some years, and that's not something that I've come across before. Just finally, I wanted to say that I still think that it's disappointing that as an authority, we don't have a more strategic approach to this. It's very much a scheme where little projects come forward, which are really important to small communities, but there isn't a way in which communities are supported to see the long-term vision for their area and to be able to work with the authority to help to achieve that. I've been trying for years to trace a wonderful little brochure I saw in either Devon or Dorset, which was brilliant at taking that approach. I'd love to track it down, and if any of the officers know what I'm talking about, please dig it out for me, because that was so good. And also, as Councillor Billat said in her public question about connecting these bids to other pieces of work and other projects and helping communities to see that bigger picture, would be really helpful. And I struggle with the lack of resource that goes into seeing the bigger picture with this. And I understand we don't have the money. We probably never will have the money, but that just adds to the feeling that this really wasn't a good process this year. And I really want to get to the bottom of that.
Thank you, Councillor du Preez. Those are some very genuine concerns, and I have heard some of those raised with me in the last couple of days, particularly around inflation and financing and communication. So that is something we do need to delve into within the working group. So thank you very much for highlighting that. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I have 3 questions, and they're all short ones. But first of all, just wanted to thank you, Josh, for the work you've done with the project team. And I've always found you to be very responsive to any queries that I have, which is much appreciated. So thank you. First question is, how many vacancies do you have in your projects team at the moment?
So we have a number of vacancies, but they are filled by interims. So technically there isn't a post that is unoccupied at this point in time.
That's good news, because one of the reasons why we adopted this streamlined process for LHIs was to get faster delivery. So can you assure us that this is going to take?
So the work on the non-complex schemes, which is why we split the process and picked those out as non-complex, has already kind of started and been assigned to the design team. So that has started at a point, if you like, in advance of where it would under the old process.
Glad to hear that, because one of the complaints that I get, and I'm sure all of us do, is the delay in implementing the scheme. So anything we can do to improve that is essential, and it will be very much a key litmus test for the new process. Next question. On the recommendations, it refers to how the schemes are going to be weeded out if necessary. And is there any change in that from the previous system?
So do you mean if something emerges and it's undeliverable?
Well, it says delegate to the Executive Director, Pace and Sustainability, with the Chair and Vice Chair of the committee to remove schemes that prove to be undeliverable.
So no, as far as I'm aware, there is no difference from, if you like, previous years in the process.
The reason I ask that is because obviously removing schemes that are undeliverable is a sensitive subject, and does require maximum transparency in my view. And I think that if we're going to stick to the same system, then that's fine. But we do need to make sure that our constituents are fully informed. It's important to bear in mind as well, Josh, of course, that a good number of parishes don't meet on a monthly basis. So in order to inform them about the success or the difficulties in the scheme, particularly if you're asking them for extra money, you've got to give them enough time to be able to have a parish council meeting, because most of them are very reluctant to make decisions by email. So that's just something to bear in mind. And the final question I have relates to cost. And I'm going to use as an example a scheme that I'm familiar with within my division. The proposal to reduce from 60 to 50 on a road, straight road, no traffic calming, £18,000. I think that's ridiculous. So why are these figures so high?
So for the purposes of the non-complex pricing, we essentially had to take an average of what it would cost to reduce a speed limit over a fixed length of road across the county. So that is the figure that has been applied to all of those speed limit change applications. Within that, risk is a factor as well. So it is a absolute worst case, but it is managing expectations up front with regards to the cost. So we don't have to keep going back to parishes saying, we need you to approve another cost increase or whatever else. So it should save us time. It's managing expectations up front. And because of the non-complex process, not having that detailed feasibility phase to basically mean that we can move into actually designing and progressing them quicker. When compared to the complex, we took a fixed average, and all of those averages are advertised on our website as well, and applicants were pointed towards those costs before making an application. So they're all there in black and white.
I'm aware of that. Is there no room for making a more bespoke pricing arrangement? Because
Councillor King, can I ask you to wrap up your question slightly, please?
Well,
there's three, and I've allowed you to keep going, but please make this the last one.
Chair, yes, thank you. They have been quick questions though. So what I think would be very helpful, Josh, is if we could have a more bespoke pricing scheme, along the lines that some of my colleagues have mentioned, so that instead of just hitting parishes with these huge figures, we can actually be more accurate, if you like, because not every stretch of road is going to cost the same amount to reduce the speed limit, for example.
No, agreed. I think one of the areas I've tasked my team with looking at before the next round is basically looking at tidying up the LHI website, making it a bit more user friendly, and looking at bandings for various things.
Thank you, Josh.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Josh, and thank you, Chair
King. I also do think personally that when we looked at the price brackets for these, 10,000 for the non-complex, 25,000 for the complex, that was prior to the huge amounts of inflation we've seen this year. And obviously we weren't expecting the things that happened, shall we say, that led to that vast amounts of inflation, which would not have been a problem previously. So I think in future years, we probably need to take back to the LHI working group how we deal with inflation, and making sure that that doesn't affect the art of the possible within those schemes, because obviously I think we've seen some schemes that now have been priced out of what should have been a bracket there. So we need to look at that as part of the working group. But Councillor King, I'm aware as well you're on that working group, are you not? So I'm sure we can take some of those points away. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to apologise that I was only appointed to this committee as a sub less than 24 hours ago, so I'm not quite as up to speed as some of my colleagues. I would like to say that what Councillor Dupre had to say is I find myself in agreement with her on 95% of what she said. And I suspect it's because his experience from the same division, the same district. But I do agree with her, and I would like to underline the fact that the county council should take a slightly more holistic view of what's going on, because what happens in one village can well have knock-on effects either for good or bad for one down the road. And so I think it is better to look as a slightly bigger thing as opposed to just one village, and take into account everything else. Yes, I think that's a working cooperation is what I really wanted to see there. And finally, I noticed that East Cambs has got the smallest budget, as you'd expect, but it's got the biggest underspend. And I really wanted to be absolutely sure, and maybe it's covered somewhere else, that the next year we go back to it, we start at all level. We don't sort of say, oh, East Cambs is 25 grand less than everyone else. We start as a zero again.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt, and good to have you on this committee. Welcome to your first committee meeting here. So I think I'd just like to point out that the funding for these is based on population. So it's the split of the LHI budget according to population across all of the different areas. Now, there is a slight thing there that the population was based on the 2011 census, which actually means the city and South Cambs is currently slightly underfunded because we've also seen large amounts of population growth within the city and South Cambs. So we do need to make sure next year that we're using the most up-to-date census data that we have. And that, according to my maths, does make some slight changes, not huge changes, but slight changes to the funding allocations to each area. But yes, it is based on population, not based on demand or anything else like that. It is based on that. And do I have anybody else on this? Councillor Sharp.
Sorry, Chair. My question was, can I be assured that for the next round, we don't have any carry on from this? Some money's been taken, which is spent somewhere else for this year, which is fine. But next year we start as normal.
It is based on population.
With a level playing field, and we don't suffer at East Cambs for being generous to our neighbours.
No, it's based on population. It's 100% every year. It is based on population of each of those different areas. There is no give or take depending on need or anything else like that. It is 100% level playing field based on population, the funding allocations for each area. And Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. A number of points. I'd like to thank Josh for the report and the work he's done with the member working group. And I think it was unfortunate we had diary. We did try to arrange a member working group before today's committee, but unfortunately we couldn't agree on dates. But I know we've got 3 set up in the pipeline, so I welcome that. In terms of just some points which I'm sure I will feed into the working group, and it's touched on. I think Councillor King touched on it. Is applications that for one village that affect another village. I think that's also similar in the city as well. And I think I'm not thinking of any specific scheme here, but obviously I think we need to make sure that there is residents' understanding and acceptance of all the schemes that we put forward. But I'll go into more detail in the working group. Communications, totally agree with Councillor Daunton's comments. And 2 other points, and also the feedback as well in terms of why they didn't succeed. And I'm not going to touch on the specifics, but also previous schemes that have been agreed from previous years but haven't yet been implemented. I was with a parish council chairman yesterday, and the last contact they'd had was 3 months ago from an email from an officer saying, oh, the scheme, is being progressed, blah, blah, blah. I'll take the specifics outside with Josh, but I think that's also important as well, because the parish is sat there thinking, and they've reserved some money aside and not knowing what's happening. And that touches on to the East Cams, because I've had 4 villages in my patch who've still been awaited. Admittedly, some of those schemes have now been done prior to putting in the next application, and that's why they didn't do it. So I think we need to learn from that. More communications, better. Touching on budget, and I'm just trying to make sure I understood this. I think it was 2.11. Is the actual spending of previous year's schemes, do they come out of the current year budget, or are we rolling forward that budget from where the schemes from, say, March 23, 31st of March 2023, we've got X number of schemes haven't been finalised. Are we rolling forward that budget that we agreed, or is that sort of lost and we start afresh?
No, so the budget's rolled over and carried forward essentially. So this is completely new funding that is solely for these schemes that are proposed as part of this report.
Okay, thank you. I misunderstood what you said then, Josh, apologies. I've certainly had the situation that was touched on by Councillor Dupre and the chair about where we're coming along for extra funding. And I do remember, I don't think we ever got to a conclusion. I think we had a debate probably 18 months ago about what we did in those situations, certainly when we were at the stage where the inflation of building materials was very much more than it is now. So that is a comment, certainly for smaller parishes who don't necessarily have the funds. And again, in the working group, I know some of the city schemes, they're very important and well needed, but they come out way above the limits of this, and it maybe touches on the limits of the schemes. So we need to maybe identify those schemes beforehand, because otherwise we're wasting officer time, spend a lot of time on them, and when perhaps they can be funded in another way or looked at in another way. And finally, really just obviously, hopefully we can come back to the working group, can do a report back to this committee of some of those improvements to the scheme, because the scheme is well looked forward by parishes and obviously parts of the city. But we are all aware, I think there are issues that we could address at some stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp, and thank you for your points there. The city one is an interesting point about people applying for larger schemes. I think it's unfortunately the city doesn't have parishes, so therefore it has lots of residents that don't necessarily understand the limitations of budget. So therefore, when they want a scheme, they throw it in, it being their only way. I think though, Josh, am I right in saying that those city schemes that were way over budget, so we heard from Mark Risen there about that one, that they've been taken into other or looking for other avenues of funding that might be more appropriate to them?
Correct. So that, pardon, sorry, they're probably going on to the tip list, and then potentially the Delivering Transport Strategy Aims programme would pick those up if they scored high enough. But that's not a guarantee of funding. No, it's just another funding programme.
Thank you for that. And I know that we have a report coming on the TIP to a future council meeting to look at how that is done. Councillor Shayler, I think you're next on my list.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick comment on it. Clearly the scheme, this is something that we are working on in the working group, and it's ongoing. And there are problems that we're going to deal with in terms of communication is very, very important. This should be a good news story, but often it's about disappointment. And I take Councillor Dupre's points. If it was about people being beaten down by disappointment, I think City would have given up years ago. But there are other factors that are going to come into this. Decentralization will have some effect. So this is very much going forward and ongoing. The problem about where schemes have got to in the past, they used to just fall off a list and a cliff, and then a couple of years later we find that they have gone away. So I don't think I think we are going in the right direction, as Councillor Boulet said. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Shayler. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. Been waiting patiently, but good comments. First of all, to say to Josh and the team, I think overall, both in this and 20 mile an hour, that overall they've done a very good job. But we have a real problem, and that problem is inflation. I call it highways inflation. So as we stand today, and I don't have to tell Sue and John and Frank and the officers. So if we take regular CPI, RPI inflation and highways inflation going forward next year, then already today, if I understand things, we're going to have about 25% reduction in our LHI budget for next year on the basis of 5% inflation and 30% highways inflation, which is not the fault of Josh or any of the officers or anybody here. That is a real problem. And we're seeing evidence of that in the list that's occurred, because and I do take on board not to go into too parochial, but so there's only 4 of the 13 schemes funded in South Cambs, and the costs are enormous. And it's not the fault of Josh, and it's not the fault of the team, but my parishes just did not understand the impact of that highways inflation, and therefore being left empty-handed. So I've got a real concern about engagement next year as a result of this, because we've got a very high failure rate for very good schemes because of this highways inflation factor. And I'm assuming, if we see 5, 6, I don't know, % increase in our LHI budget, same thing's going to happen next year. So we have a disconnect, and we have to really address this, because it's a really serious issue. All of the parishes I observed in South Cambs on the panel really put a lot of time and effort and thought into this, and they've come away completely empty-handed, because I think that expectation and that communication at the beginning, not any of the fault of Josh's team, it's just where we are. We just didn't really spell that out to them in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. I do very much take on board your comments about inflation. I do just want to correct one slight thing there, that it was only 3 in the complex that were successful. There's 15 in the non-complex in South Cambs that were successful. So that's quite a few more in total. And we have actually seen an increase in the total number of schemes being successful this year, despite those funding challenges. So that is positive, given the very challenging environment that we're in, and hopefully we can look at that funding going forwards. Do I have anybody else? No. Brilliant. Okay. In that case, then, the committee is asked to note the prioritised list as attached for the 2023-24 programme and delegate authority to approve those to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair, following a review of the moderated officer scoring for those applications in the non-complex process by the LHI member working group. Wow, that is a sentence. And to B, delegate authority to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair to remove schemes that prove to be undeliverable and add new schemes in their place as outlined in the report. Can I take that by affirmation, or do I have any dissent in the room? No. Okay, no dissent. So let's carry it by affirmation. Now, I'm aware we have now been going for 2 hours, so I would suggest we take a short comfort break. Should we say 10 minutes? Is that enough for everyone? I'm aware I don't want to go on too late. So if everyone can meet back here at 12:10, that would be brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, and welcome back. Sorry for giving people a few more minutes to munch their crisps and everything else. Councillor French, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I do have to leave at 1 prompt to have a meeting in.
Thank you for letting me know, Councillor French. We will try and get through this as quickly as we can. Item 7 then is presents you with a speed strategy, and David Allett, Assistant Director of Highways, will take us through this report. This item was published after the deadline owing to necessary sign-offs having been completed. So I've exercised my discretion, except this is a late report due to the importance of the subject and to avoid delay. David, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Cambridgeshire County Council is a member of the Vision Zero Road Safety Partnership. We work with our key local authority, police and emergency services and victim support partners to take a systems-based approach to road safety with the goal of eradicating fatalities on our roads. Speed is, of course, a really important component of the road system. It determines the severity of crashes and injuries and can affect the potential to avoid a crash. So this paper presents the Vision Zero speed strategy. Now, this document is not designed to replace any existing policy, but it does set out best practice with regard to identifying safe, credible and posted speeds, and this was developed with our Vision Zero partners. What the paper also does is respond to a county council motion from last summer, as set out in 2.5. The motion expressed the value of speed buffer zones, and it asked that officers identify how such zones could be facilitated. Well, since that motion was put forward and agreed, the County Council has enhanced its speed data set. So we have digitized the county roads at a much more granular level. And what this allows is more specific analysis of speeds by route section. We've also attracted additional speed funding, that being through the 20-mile-an-hour zones from the Combined Authority and its Transforming Cities funding. We have included buffer zones by default in that process. So since the motion, we have been designing buffer zones as part of that scheme. So Stilton, Woodhurst, Somersham and Great Granston have speed buffer zones soon to be introduced. And we have identified that the LHI mechanism remains the most appropriate as an ongoing tool to advance those buffer zones. We recognise that this will require further refinements to the prioritisation approach, but we recommend that that does happen in advance of the next call for LHI schemes. And so a delegation is sought in that regard to the Executive Director for Place and Sustainability in liaison with the cross-party working group, so that the next scheme assessment can give suitable weighting to buffer zones. Hopefully that provides a helpful update since the motion of last year.
Thank you very much, David. So we'll move to any questions of clarification and the debate. Do I have a starter? There you go, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, David, for the report. I very much welcome this because speed buffer zones, particularly have been proved to work in my division, and my parishes are very, very grateful for them. And even today, I have now received today, Tilbrook have recently had their buffer zones put in on the B645, and they have seen a considerable reduction in traffic speeds through their village. So I welcome it, and I look forward to seeing it being rolled out more across the county.
That's very good to hear, Councillor Gardner. I will take that as a parochial matter since it's a positive one. So thank you very much. Councillor King.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wondered, this is really about accident prevention and particularly KSI prevention. Where is the evidence that buffer zones improve those statistics, please?
David, can I hand over to you for that one?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole host of evidence that I've not quoted in the paper just about the reduced severity of injury at different speeds. But within the appendix, I include, I think it's called a Nielsen model, which is a diagram showing the increased risk at higher vehicle speeds. So taking that logic and following it through, as long as those speeds are introduced with the appropriate features, you have a potential there when entering a village to reduce the speed and therefore reduce both the likelihood and severity of any associated collision.
I think I could just follow up, Chair. I think it would be very useful, given the pressure upon funding, and we're going to be pushing this into the LHI schemes, if we could have some really good evidence that buffer zones will reduce casualties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. And I know, while not related to buffer zones, when I've been looking at the 20-mile-an-hour work that we're doing, even a 1 mile per hour drop in speed leads to 6% reduction in accidents. And that on average, if you just reduce the speed from 30 to 20, it does result in a reduction in speed, even if it isn't the full 10 miles an hour, by enough to significantly reduce casualties. While I haven't looked exactly into buffer zones, I'm sure it's the same there, and I'm sure we can dig out that research for you on what that means. Sorry, next on my list, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very supportive of these buffer zones and the 20-mile-an-hour schemes that are being implemented across the county. There's one in my division which is going in at the moment and is going to reduce speeds no end. I think it's going to be pretty self-enforcing, because we've already been indicated that the police are, and it says in our paper, unlikely to be that receive targeted enforcement in isolation. I think that's a great pity, because I think the police should be enforcing both buffer zones and 20-mile-an-hour limits. But overall, I'm very pleased that this is all happening, and I think that a lot of the benefit is going to be self-enforcement rather than targeted enforcement by the police. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And yes, I think we're all sad that the police don't enforce as much as we would like to, but it is good to see that even without enforcement, it does lead to fewer accidents, which is brilliant. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I support the better mechanism for the 40-mile-an-hour schemes. What I want to touch on, though, is looking at the appendix, is around, and I'm going to use an example from my division, is around the 60-mile-an-hour limit. I think we have lots, being a very rural county, we have lots of roads, and I'm sure there are a lot in Fenland as well, and South Cambs and Huntingdonshire. I've got a road in my patch which is straight for about a mile. It's right on the Suffolk border. People speed along it quite considerably. There was a fatality of 2 young lads 10 yards into Suffolk. It's right on the just over the level crossing for the Cambridge to Ipswich line, and there was a very serious accident about 4 or 5 years ago, where 2 guys whose car had broken down were basically hit, and one's ended up in a wheelchair, one's, and there have been fatalities over the years on that road. And I've been written, there's about 16 houses, I think, on the left-hand side as you go along that road, and I've been written to by the residents, and we're obviously trying to see if we can get a speed reduction. But it's really I've used that as an example, but it's what can we do to get to Vision Zero with, obviously we need to educate drivers that speed, kills, for want of a better word, but how can we sort of get that message out there and improve those roads that are very, very dangerous purely because of the speed? They're very straight roads, and we've just got drivers who are driving too fast for the conditions. So it's a rhetorical question.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. I'm not sure if you actually want an answer to that one, but yes, it is a big problem, and particularly those long straight roads we have where people are actually driving inappropriately fast, in excess of the speed limits, and we see it a lot in Fenland, where we have those big, long, straight roads, and suddenly, before they know it, somebody is tragically hurt, and that is, I think, one of the worst parts of our job as committee members is
very quickly. I mean, I know it's that particular road, we probably see one of the traffic camera, the camera vans probably twice a year, so they do police it, but obviously there are so many other roads. I'm sure most of the colleagues here have got similar roads in their divisions, and it's just, I'm thinking aloud really, I haven't got the answer as to how we actually get people to reduce their speed on what is very straight roads, and sadly they lose control or something happens, and we know the consequences.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Yes, it's tragic. Councillor French.
Thank you. Yeah, I fully support this paper. As you're well aware, on the A141, especially the March bypass, we have had some serious RTs, and I see in the rest of the paper where they had a fatality at Doddington. That is going to be looked at under the road safety. So yes, I do welcome this reduction.
Thank you very much, Councillor French. Councillor Daunton.
Yes, I'll just add to what Councillor Sharp has said about the straight roads in the rural areas. And they also tend to be the roads where cyclists are using the same space as motorists speeding. And I think Councillor Sharp will know the particular roads that I'm thinking of. And it is a really serious issue in the areas where there are no cycle paths.
Thank you, Councillor Daunton. Totally agree. Anybody else? No. In that case, then I think we can all say how important this is, and reducing speeds is so important to all of us in that Vision Zero work. There is obviously so much more work to be done, but I really do welcome this as a step in the right direction, with no doubt many, many more steps to go. I have asked at some point whether we can arrange some more deeper conversations with the police, because I think it is important that we work hand in glove on that, reducing speeds. They obviously have a lot more of the responsibilities than we do for actually enforcing it, but that partnership working is so important. So, Councillor Shayler, sorry.
Sorry, just get in there. Yeah, I very much applaud the work that we're doing on Vision Zero, and would like to draw attention to the junior travel ambassadors. I was at a meeting in Cottenham recently, and the energy and commitment by the schools and the parents across the county is absolutely fantastic. And of course, we have the Road Victims Trust, and so there are many people working on this, and it's not only the direct victims of these road fatalities and injuries, but their families. It had horrific effect. It's like a terrorist outrage every year in our county, and we really, really, really need to bring it down. I might even run another Road Victims Trust half marathon. We'll see how much time I have to train. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shayler. So the committee is asked to endorse the Vision Zero Part Zero Speed Management Strategy, to note the progress, to note the process to progress speed buffer zones in Cambridgeshire in response to the County Council motion of July 2022 to get delegate authority to make amendments to the local highways improvement scoring criteria to better accommodate buffer zones to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability, taking account of comments from the cross-party members working group. Can I take that by affirmation? Any dissent? No. Okay, that's carried by affirmation. Thank you very much. Item 8 is regarding the Road Safety Programme of 2023-24. David Allett again, Assistant Director of Highways, together with Nicola Gardner, Parking Policy Manager, will take us through the report. Again, this item was published after the deadline, owing to the necessary sign-offs having been completed. I have therefore exercised my discretion to accept this item late due to its importance of the subject and to avoid delays in the programme. David and Nicola, over to you.
Yep, thanks, Chair. So, following on from the last paper on road safety, this paper presents the proposed road safety programme for 23-24 for your approval. So this relates to the 594,000 allocation from the integrated transport block. Now, this is not the only funding source for road safety. There are schemes funded by other sources that embed road safety as part of the design. So when we talk about active travel funding, the GCP programme, or indeed monies from the Combined Authority for their county-wide speed reduction measures through the Transforming Cities that I mentioned in the last paper. However, the ITB is our specific road safety capital pot. And as with previous years, the prioritisation is informed by the cluster size list. So that is so that we target investment on those areas which have suffered the greatest in terms of frequency and severity of collisions. So within the paper, an update's provided on last year's schemes at 2.3 to 2.6, including Wheatsheaf Crossroads and Swatham Heath Crossroads, which are progressing. The proactive IRAP assessments, the International Road Assessment Programme, that's presently out for procurement, and work continues on Puddock Road, which is also proposed for investment this year. So in terms of our 23-24 recommendations for the programme, these are set out in 2.9 to 2.11. We seek 300,000 of the allocation towards Puddock Road to design and implement the physical barriers or physical measures on the corridor, a corridor upon which there were 4 fatal incidents where a vehicle entered the water into the adjacent drain. So really important that we close out that design work and progress to implementation of physical measures there. We propose 200k towards the risk allocation for Swatham Heath, a project which we are almost ready to mobilise on. However, we're concerned that the risk profile on that project needs topping up. Should that money not be spent, we would redirect that to the minor works pot. And thirdly, the A141 south of Wimbledon, we've recognised that following a fatal collision in 2022, there was effectively issues with the surface in there. We want to carry out investigations into that area to identify whether or not there are underlying issues that may have caused the driver to leave the carriageway. So that's the programme for this year as proposed, and the programme would allow us to advance capital works in those locations that are of concern. A decision is sought from this committee.
Thank you very much, David. Members, over to you. Do I have any questions, or does anyone want to open the debate? No. Okay, that's very good. In that case, then I think we can all agree how important this is. So let's move to the recommendations. The committee is asked to approve the capital programme and safety schemes for 2023-24 outlined in Appendix A, and to note the schemes being delivered by the Greater Cambridge Partnership as outlined in Appendix B. Can I take that by affirmation? Yes, brilliant. Passed. Thank you very much. So item 9 on the agenda we move to now is a report that presents an update on the ITB funding allocation for delivering transport strategy aims, and Kat Rutnagi, Funding and Innovation Programme Manager, will take us through that via Zoom. So Kat, apologies if I butchered your name there, but over to you. Thank you.
It's Rutanja, so you are very close, Councillor.
Thank you very much, and over to you.
All right, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. The paper that I've brought forward to you today is regarding the annual pot of funding from Department of Transport, which we receive each year via the Combined Authority. So this is a 3.2 million integrated transport block. Part of this program includes the Developing Transport Strategy Aims, and that's a 1.3 million program to deliver various schemes across the county, which are supported by our many plans or strategies. Now, this was first brought to committee in March of this year, so it's not long that we've actually shown you which schemes we'd like to apply this funding to. But since March of this year, we've received or been lucky to receive other sources of funding to put towards some of the schemes. So GCP, Active Travel, and the Transforming Cities Fund have actually stepped in to provide funding for some of the schemes that were previously approved by committee. And as a result of that, we have £805,000 of the DTSA money, which is now available for us to spend to reallocate to other schemes, which didn't previously have funding. So I've shown in Appendix 2 which schemes we've proposed this 800,000 could go towards. The way we've looked at these schemes, they're all schemes which have come to various committees. They're also schemes which we believe can be fully or partly delivered within this financial year. Some of the schemes have links with other schemes already happening on the ground, different projects that are already in progress. So it makes sense to deliver them together if we can get the funding. So that's how we've compiled the list, which is in Appendix 2. And we're basically asking you to review that list in Appendix 2 and give us the go ahead to use that 800,000 towards those schemes.
Thank you very much, Kat. Members, do I have any questions of clarification or debate? Claire, Councillor Daunton, over to you.
I just wonder if there is any relationship between these schemes and the lack of other modes of transport. So improving cycling for those areas that do not have bus transport, and whether we could see some connection between the two.
Yes, definitely. Kat, do you want to, or David, do you want to answer that as well? Or David, you're looking, yeah.
I mean, this pot of money can facilitate prioritisation to help the flow of buses through, but the funding for buses itself is a combined authority.
Claire,
That wasn't what I was meaning. What I was meaning is that the whole areas of the county that don't have bus services and don't have cycle paths, and could there not be some joined up thinking about where the money for active travel goes?
that is a very valid point. Maybe that's something we can consider at our next meeting when we look at the transport infrastructure plan and how we prioritise things from there. So thank you very much for that point, Councillor Daunton. Anybody else? Councillor King, over to you.
I wouldn't want to disappoint you, Chair. Kat, thank you very much for the report. And I just had a question on the final item or the final line in Appendix 2, which is just getting it up here, sorry. Continue to develop and implement 20-mile-per-hour program. So this is additional money from the money that was available earlier. So will there be a new round of applications open for the 20-mile-per-hour speed limits?
Kat or David, do you want to answer that one? So Councillor King was asking about future funding for 20-mile-an-hour bottom-up schemes. That yes, I believe there will be a future round of funding for bottom-up 20-mile-an-hour schemes. But David, do you want to?
Yeah, that's right. And we will also be looking externally, as we did with the Transforming Cities, for opportunities to draw in for that to be a rolling process.
Yeah, and just to add there, from an administration point of view, 20-mile-an-hour was one of our joint administration priorities. So we are always looking at funding opportunities for that and rolling out as many of those as possible. You do still have your microphone as well on, Councillor King. I'm not sure whether you wanted to come back very quickly.
I did just want to clarify that because I'm not quite sure. So the last round of 20-mile-per-hour applications were sort of in the spring. So do we have any idea of the timescale for this round that will be facilitated by this additional money?
I don't have that information right now, I'm afraid, but I can contact our project delivery officers and let you know if that's okay.
That would be really helpful because there are a number of parish councils in my area that I think would be very interested in putting in an application, and maybe the last round took them a bit by surprise. So if we could clarify that, that'd be great. Thanks very much, Kat.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, and Councillor King, I think I should probably say at this point, I was actually really disappointed to hear how many of the Fenland areas didn't take up the funding offer for the Transforming Cities funding and the wide 20-mile-an-hour programs. It was really sad to see Fenland really falling short there on 20-mile-an-hour funding that was seized in other areas. But yes, if they did want to apply via the bottom-up process, obviously that would be open as well. It was just really disappointing to see that.
I think that, you know, I don't want to prolong the discussion, but I think that there was some concern about having blanket 20-mile-per-hour towns in in Finland. I think that a much better way forward is to have the ability for parishes to actually apply for targeted 20-mile-per-hour areas, and I think that would be a really successful way to go forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I am still disappointed on that one. We will see the safety benefits of 20-mile-an-hour to have those areas not supporting it. I'm not quite sure why. I know lots of people in South Cambs and the city, all of our councillors have been working with the areas to make sure they understand the safety benefits of that. So it was quite sad that they didn't take that up. But Councillor Hay.
I'll come back in response to that. It was presented to Chatteris Town Council. We're a small town, approximately 13,000 population, but the only proposition that was put to us is the whole town be 20 miles per hour limited. And We inquired if we could have 20 mile per hour in certain areas. We felt 20 mile per hour over the whole town was a bit over the top, shall we say. And we were told, no, it was either the whole town or nothing. And that's why Chatteris did not take it up. But apart from that, I did want to speak about some of these areas that are on here for funding. Some time ago, Chatteris Town Council was told that County Council had funding obtained from the CPCA to put 2 pedestrian crossings in. We objected to one of the pedestrian crossings because it was simply in the wrong place. It was too close to another pedestrian crossing we already had. And we suggested that one should be put in Bridge Street. And we were told, yes, at that time that, you know, there was every possibility this would go ahead. We haven't been told anything different. But when I look at this, it tells me Chatteris Park Street stroke East Park Street junction, investigate pedestrian crossing improvement. There isn't one there at the moment. I'm presuming that's the one that we were originally told that the combined authority money would pay for. But there's nothing on there about the Bridge Street crossing, which is the one which is more important than Park Street, East Park Street. And I'm just concerned that nobody from County Council has thought to inform Chatteris Town Council that it's been dropped, because it would appear it has been.
David or Kat, do you have any information on that, or should we take that as a way as a question to answer?
I'd like to take it away, please. It could be that it still is within the transport investment plan list, but just hasn't been prioritized on this particular list for the 805,000. But I can check that with you, please, and get back to you if that's okay.
That would be really good if we could take that away for an answer. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Councillor Hunt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it would be, I think I picked it up from another member. It would be, the council officers need to be flexible when it comes to this business of, does it hit the whole village or the whole town or just a part of it? And I think it's essential that the officers work with, as normally the case, the parish council, and they agree which part will be 20 miles an hour, because I can imagine, you know, some of my area would not be suitable. And the other thing is that it's a proper job is done, and that means it's not just sticking 20 miles an hour signs up at the beginning and the end, but there's the roundels on the actual carriageway and repeater signs, so that it's very clear. And the few occasions where I've seen it, where it has been installed, it's not been very clear. And I think just a more proactive attitude from officers would be helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. It's a more general sort of comment, although I'm aware of one specific. Looking at the reallocation of 805,000, and I sort of link it to what in East Cambs we've got a bus cycle working group, which I chair. It's a cross-party group, and we've commissioned Sustrans to do some work for us and commission looking at various cycleways. And I look at this paper and I look at take the one in Southern Fordham, Isleham, 50,000 for feasibility work. I've got one in Fenland, design and development. And my question is, that is great that we're doing the design and development, but what likelihood have we got that we will go from the feasibility or design to actually implementation? How are we going? Presumably there's things like the active travel scheme that government are running. Is that where we're looking at bidding for, or are we looking at putting it into the LC whip? Or
I think there's a whole range of ways that these schemes can get taken forwards, but you obviously need the plan and the design done before you can.
The point is, it's great to bring these schemes forward, but what I don't want us doing is wasting money on a feasibility that then sadly stops at that.
So I think I'll draw your attention to the next committee meeting, I believe it is. We have a paper coming on the transport infrastructure plan, which is essentially how things get carried forwards. And there's work being done there. So do take a look at that. There is obviously, we need to do the detailed design and then seek the funding to make sure these things do not get dropped, because they're all really important projects.
But just very quick, I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think we're looking at, shall we say, a joined up approach between this funding and then the next stage, which sounds like it's going to come to the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, they do need to be joined up, that there is kind of a pipeline process that things go through, right, to make delivery. Got to follow it all the way through. Do I have anybody else? Okay. Which one of you first? Councillor Gardner, and then Councillor French, then Councillor Hay.
Thank you very much, Chair. With regard to the 20-mile-an-hour schemes, will villages or towns that previously put in an application, will they need to reapply, or will they still be on the list? And whereabouts are those that have already applied? Whereabouts are they already on the list?
So a report is coming on the prioritised list, and I would envision that those do not get taken off the list. No, unless there are any that are unsuitable. Otherwise, they would stay on the list, and as funding allows, we work our way down the list, implementing as many as possible, opening it up to further applications, though, that then get ranked and prioritised accordingly. Councillor French.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to pick up 2 or 3 points on this. Fenland have a walking, cycling, mobility scheme in, and I don't know whether it went to County Council or went to the Combined Authority. And the 4 market towns had maps produced last month, and very nice maps of the actual towns, and it's got walking, cycling, mobility in there. Now, one of the things we were very keen was to have a cycle path from Peace Hill roundabout to Mill Hill roundabout, which is approximately 3 miles, but not.
Are we going into parochial terms here, Councillor French?
I want to know where that sits. Does it fit with county, or does it sit with the Combined Authority? All right, don't answer it then. Which obviously works in public footpaths. But I've noticed on one of them, the bottom one, Fenland, explore safety improvements at roundabout crossing points, Landgroves, Neilway, etc. Are you aware that last week at our planning committee, we agreed a BCP, business case, on that section of road? So what I don't want you to do is spend money doing stuff when we could actually get a developer to pay for that.
I'll let officers take that away and get back to you on both of those. Thank you very much. Councillor Hay, I think you were the last one down there.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to know who actually dreams up these schemes and who agrees them. The reason being, on here, they've got Chatteris key locations in the town centre, new cycle stands. Some years ago, we were giving new cycle stands. We had difficulty finding somewhere to put them. Nobody has discussed this with town council, to my knowledge. Also on here is Chatteris strategy area, cycle map and brochure, as just stated by Councillor French. FDC have produced these maps. Although having said that, we've got no cycle routes within Chatteris. So, you know, what's the point of a cycle map when you've got no cycle routes? There is areas where we desperately want money as a town councillor. The new North Cambs training centre needs a pathway leading from there to join up another pathway further on up that connects to the Tesco store, so that it's safe for people attending North Cambs to walk up and get some lunch from the Tesco store. We've been asking for that for years. It's nowhere on here. Surely people at county council should be going to the town and parish councillors and saying, this is what we're thinking of. What do you think? Or is there any other schemes you would like included?
So all of these schemes, as far as I'm aware, have come from our LC whips, our transport strategies in each of the different areas, and all of our other compendium of documents of different strategies that have been agreed in this place through many years and prioritized according to that. So obviously, if you wish to feed into those going forwards with different schemes, very happy to take those. But these, when we look at them, are prioritized based on the things that we have agreed in these meetings beforehand and how those go. Councillor Dupre, sorry.
Sorry, can I come back on that? As you say, agreed in this room, but not agreed by the town and district councils. It's a total waste of time when it's not something that the town and districts and
The
parishes want.
district councils are always consulted on all those strategies. And obviously when those strategies come up here, that's the time to bring up any of those issues. This is not that time, but we can take those away to look at where those are. Councillor Dupre.
I also wanted to pick up, I don't know whether there's some confusion about Appendix 3, because looking at the heading of Appendix 3, it's funded schemes that have taken place between 2015-16 and 2023-4. And so a lot of those schemes will be historic and will have been done, rather than being schemes that we're looking to do in the future. And I didn't know whether that was causing some confusion.
That might be. You are correct that Appendix 3 is the ones that have been funded and completed in the past. Appendix 2 is the ones that are due to be funded and be completed there. Sorry, I didn't notice whether Councillor Hay was referring to Appendix 2 or Appendix 3 in her schemes. Councillor King.
A very quick suggestion, which I have made previously, Chair. You mentioned all of these various plans, and I think it's incredibly difficult for parish councils and others, and include myself in this, to work our way through this miasma of schemes or plans. And I think, you know, if we could look at some way to simplify these, to make them more accessible for everybody, that would be a huge step forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. I am very on board with making these things as accessible as possible. One of the things we have been trying to do is bring these together into transport plans so that people can accessibly find where they are, rather than just having a tip list of suggestions, that actually having them all drawn from particular schemes and reports makes it a lot more sensible and allows people that access and to discuss them when they are. We are obviously discussing how often these get updated as well, to make sure that councillors and members of the public can feed into them and make sure that any schemes that are found to be really important after the scheme was published can then get prioritised and included in them going forwards. Keeping these up to date is incredibly important, and making sure that, you know, they do reflect the local demand as it develops. So that is another thing that we are very much looking for. Do I have any more questions and comments on this one? Councillor Shaler.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very, very quick one on the market towns 20-mile-an-hour schemes. This partly the way that this was carried forward. I totally understand that there are very specific schemes that need to be designed for areas, but the City Transformer Fund had to be spent within this calendar year, this financial year. And so those kinds of schemes, there wasn't really time to do these piecemeal designs. And so this is something very specific for this particular fund. It's not about the way we will do these things going forward, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously that's a very different topic of conversation as well, the Transforming Cities funding rather than this. But does anyone else have any questions or comments on this paper, or should we move to the vote? I am aware Councillor French needs to get going, so let's move through. So the committee is asked to consider and approve the reallocation of available delivering transport strategy aims funding for 2023-24, to delegate authority to reallocate the DTSA funding in 23-24 to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair, with the total reallocation is 500,000 or less. Can I take that by affirmation? Any dissent in the room? Thank you. Agreed. Item 10 is the Highways and Transport Service Transformation Plan. And John Munslow, Assistant Director of Highways Maintenance, will take us through this report. John, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members, or good afternoon now. So this report sets out the Highways and Transportation Service Transformation Plan, updating members on progress and the programme of future actions that we're taking with it to improve and transform the service. The report provides the draft transformation plan and provides a response to full council motion of May 2023 in relation to highways maintenance. Our highways management and maintenance is a key service impacting our communities, businesses and visitors, enabling access to employment, education, leisure and essential services, and ensuring the highway in all its forms is effectively managed and maintained in a customer-focused and responsive way is a key priority. The report sets out the contents context and environment within which the service is being delivered, improved and transformed. Those pressures are described in the report: inflation impacting on the scale of what can be afforded, financial pressures at a local and national level for investment in revenue and proactive maintenance, changing user demand and the need to support walking, cycling, wheeling and horse riding as sustainable and healthy modes of travel. And also the change in weather that is seeing more increasing intense rainfall and hotter periods, creating increased flood risk on our roads, and also being seen in the soil movements on those roads that are on peat-based soils across the county. And also the increasing demand for maintenance due to our aging road infrastructure. Now, work to tackle these challenges and to transform the service, particularly maintenance, is underway. We have the Safe and Dry programme and enhanced grip cutting programmes to tackle weather and drainage. The investigation into the peat soil affected roads across the network, and the development of management plans to support safe use as we manage the way those roads are deteriorating. And the increased resource we've put to targeting and dealing with the potholes since the winter period, and the work going on there to reduce future numbers of potholes as well. And we've recently seen the highway maintenance restructured to provide capability capacity within this area of service, to provide client intelligence and respond better to our customers. The Highway Transformation Programme is being delivered to focus on achieving 4 key aims. These are improving customer excellence to ensure effective customer engagement, response and information, supported by modern systems and processes. Achieving service excellence, which is ensuring effective long-term decision-making via an effective asset management strategy, programme delivery and performance management. And achieving value for money, ensuring resources within the service are directed and used effectively via effective, well-managed contracts and relationships. And we'll be looking at all our various contracts and ways we deliver to ensure we're maximising value for money in all that we do and how we deliver that. And developing our customer and workforce. And that's ensuring that the organisational structure is fit for purpose and that staff are led, engaged, motivated and skilled to deliver the best we can. In the report, key projects contributing to each theme are described, and section 2.7 of the report sets out the governance of this programme under a newly established officer board. This is the Highways Transformation Board, and the board will ensure oversight of the programmes, ensure capacity and commitment as required from internal departments and external partners, and ensure the service as a whole is contributing to the council's visions and ambitions. The board will provide corporate governance, assurance and confidence that the transformation is achieving the outcomes and benefits that we require. The progress of the transformation will be reported to members together with updates on our performance and updates on our risk register to Highways and Transportation Committee on a quarterly basis. And the report outlines the benefits to be realised under each of the themes in section 2.9, with further detail of the 14 projects and actions in Appendix 1, the Highways Improvement Action Plan. Now, the programme of transformation will deliver that improved customer experience through better engagement and communication, and we'll be measuring that through improved customer satisfaction. Members will have better, more timely information, and the service will demonstrate quality of the service delivered and associated maintenance works on the ground through enhanced service performance management and quality monitoring. And we'll be providing value for money, demonstrating best value and good financial management. And one of the other outcomes benefits is that carbon reduction strategy and action plan that will support the delivery of net zero within the service, and that will be measured through the triple bottom line accounting. The full set of projects and actions are, as I said, detailed in Appendix 1 of the report, and I'll be happy to answer any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Before we get into the debate, I do just want to say a thank you from all of us to the hard work that officers are putting in right now. I know that highways maintenance is a subject that gets much passion, but I know that it is also incredibly challenging. And this year has been incredibly challenging. And I know the very long hours that members of the team have put in to try and turn things around and to try and help. So while I know that everything has not been perfect this year, I would like to take the time for us all to thank you for all of the work that has gone in and the hours where I know staff have not seen their families in order to try and give us a highway that is actually working for us. So thank you for that. I know how much work has gone into it. Members, do I have any questions or does anyone want to start the debate? Councillor Daunton.
Thank you very much, John, for the paper. Could you just give us a little bit more detail on how members will have better, more timely information and awareness of maintenance activities in their area? How that will happen?
Yes, so that will happen through the results of a number of those projects within the themes. Two key ones is one that's in place at the moment and settling in is the highway maintenance restructure. So where we have increased the management and support provided to the local highway officers who are very much a conduit to yourselves and supporting the delivery of highways in the community, so that strengthened management and leadership will help support the direct relationships there, and they will be supported through the new asset management system, which will enable us to provide much better information, particularly around those reports and inquiries that come in from the public, and we'll also be developing a more proactive system of keeping you informed in your areas of the various maintenance works programs that are going on. That we put a lot of information on the web pages. I'll be looking for the teams to be actively pushing that out to yourselves and improving the information that comes through to you in the highway service updates.
Yes, Councillor Daunton, you can follow up.
So you mentioned about the restructuring. Is that complete? And at some point, could members see what that looks like in the form of, the reporting lines? And then you also mentioned the asset management, a new asset management tool. Just could you let us know when that will come into effect or be put into effect? Thank you.
Yes, the restructure, there is detail provided in the latest highway service update, which I think is about to go out now. Yeah, so that will be coming out to you. And the new tool, the new asset management tool, that we are in the middle of the procurement process. We are looking to appoint our provider towards the end of this month. And then we will start implementation. Implementation is likely to be through a series of kind of modules. So we'll rather than having to set a whole system up and then doing everything at once, we'll do it by modules. I don't know exactly when the new report it type module will be in place, but as we go through the procurement process, I'll make sure we keep you updated on timelines of delivery. On the whole, the objective is to get the whole system in place by the end of 2024. Is that right? Yeah, 2024. Sorry, getting my financial years right.
Thank you very much. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, I just want to echo the remarks that you made about the work of John and his team. All of my dealings with John have been very positive, and so that's a really, really good experience for me. One question, John, about the procurement of this new fault reporting tool. My memory is that we were supposed to have a member briefing in December of last year, or is that a faulty memory?
We did have a member workshop on it. I can't remember whether it was John. Can you remember any more?
We did have a member workshop where we looked at the requirements of a report it tool from the community and member perspective, and that workshop fed into the specification that we're now using for the procurement.
Yes, my apologies for missing that, John. I don't have any memory of it. The invitation might have gone to the wrong email address, but I'm sorry I missed that, and I'm glad it took place. I have two further questions, suggestions. Looking at the box in 2.9, it's service excellence, condition of the highway, percentage of defects repaired within the required timeframes. I think there's another really important performance indicator that should be included there, and that is the percentage of defects that have to be reattended, because that's a complaint that I get all the time, that no sooner is a pothole filled than it has to be refilled. So I would like to suggest that that's included in that box as a really key performance indicator. And the second suggestion is that in the appendix, you've got a list of benefits, which are fine. I don't have any quarrels with that, but I think those need to be translated into firm quantitative performance indicators that, that will enable us to judge whether the things that you're doing are working. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. And that, going back to the same area KPI, is something I have been very keen on for a very long time, that reopen rate. From what I understand, it's something that our current asset management system doesn't allow us to easily get to, but something that we'll be looking at doing going forwards, because yes, that's an incredibly important indicator, how often we go back to do the same thing. Who do I have next? Councillor.
Sorry, Chair, can I just follow that up? So will that be included in that box that I mentioned earlier in the report? That percentage of
the reopen rate, it is something we're looking at deliver. Oh, sorry, John.
Yes, we just in the last couple of weeks carried out an initial quality monitor on that reopen rate, that defects reattended, amongst other quality monitoring. So we're developing the quality monitoring system, and we'll make sure that is included in the quarterly reports to committee.
Yeah, I think there is a subtly different one there as well, John. I know you've been doing a lot of work on the quality of defect repairs. I think there's also a section of how often we go back to the same area. So it's not necessarily the quality of the repair, it's neighboring defects in that area as well that should have been picked up at the same time.
I very much agree, Chair. Those two things should be taken together. So yeah. I would welcome that. And the other thing that I did also ask about turning the benefits into quantitative performance indicators, when can we expect that to happen, please?
I'm not going to give you an exact timeline on that yet. We are looking at all of the KPIs and developing them. I don't have the exact information when we'll be able to do that fully, but Chair, definitely trying to take it forward as quickly as we can.
This year or next year or when?
I think some of that will depend on the new asset management system and the art of the possible. It will be as quickly as I possibly can. John, do you want to add any information on that?
Yeah, it will be towards the end of this financial year. Okay. Over the summer and autumn, we'll be building up that suite of KPIs, and that will be in readiness for making sure that the new asset management system is able to accurately report them to us, rather than at the moment where a lot of things are quite a manual process.
Thank you very much, John. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. So just a couple of comments. I would also echo the observations, and thanks to John for the response that he and the team have provided, because we had a very difficult winter, which we know is a national issue. It's not just a Cambridgeshire issue. And I think that his response and the team's response has been really good. Thank you very much. Just one observation on Geist. So a couple of my parishes have, had some insight from what Geist provides, and the feedback so far has been very positive. I probably don't fully appreciate what it can and can't do and how we can deploy it. So I note that in the plan, John, you mentioned there would be some member updates or member briefing, and I look forward to that, because the feedback is we think it's got a lot of potential and will help us a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks to all the councillors for the words of thanks. I will pass them on to the team. Much appreciated. Thank you. With regard to GASTE, we are arranging an on Teams presentation workshop for members where we'll get GASTE in so they can talk about their technology and also to present to members how we're using that technology and also how we are planning to use that technology for more benefit.
Thank you, John. It is really fascinating to see what new technology is coming forwards and what it can do for us and how it can help improve things and reduce the burden down on officers given their shortage of time as always. Does anybody else have anything on this? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to thank John and Sue for the report and thank you for going through it with me last week and picking up the salient points. Just a couple of things. I agree with Councillor Dornton, the restructuring chart would, that would be welcomed. And I think from what Councillor King was saying, my recollection, I think, was we were going to have a member briefing on the 4 options or whatever back in December, but I believe because of procurement rules that basically the members can't be involved in the procurement, therefore that ideal suggestion obviously fell by the wayside because of various procurement rules is my understanding. I think Sue's nodding, so that was my recollection. Just 2 other points. One is looking at the report that we're talking about the report for the soil affected roads this month, so that'll be, well, it says July in the report, but that'll be worthwhile looking at. And the only other comment I've got, and I've got one specific again going on at the moment, is better communication around street works in the rural areas. I've got Anglian Water putting in a new supply. They found a leak and it's been closed for a week. And of course, it cuts off one end of the village from the other. And I've been dealing with the street works team. That I got a call from them yesterday morning updating me, which is great. But what it would be better, more communication to members, because I've got residents actually talking to me all the time about it. But also the signage as well, where you get a bottom of a road closed. It doesn't really tell you where it is. It just says a detour. The road could be closed half a mile up the road, or quite often it's closed 5 miles up the road. And so people can get to 2 villages. Councillor Dupre's nodding, and I think this is a general issue. And then people think, oh, they ignore it. They think, oh, we know it's closed up the road, and they'll suddenly get to that stop. And I know it's difficult, but it's something I think we could be better at. I think is maybe a best description of it.
Happy to take that on board in a way. I think there is sometimes the difficulty of between contractors and street works and everything else, and I think it's 27 different providers we're currently working with across the county. And I know I've had my own run-ins with City Fibre recently and various other ones.
It's that sort of thing that irritates residents more than other things. You get it, I get it an email, or I'm walking with the dog and I'll suddenly get 3 people who'll stop me on the walk, all to moan about, the road closed sign and everything else. So
yeah, I also in my own area had Anglian Water come out and then bring the wrong size digger, so they then had to do it another day, which is not ideal, should we say, when they've done things. But yes, very happy to take that away. Streetworks and LHOs are incredibly important to all of our locals. It's they're 2 most frequent contacts with highways. LHOs, LHIs, and streetworks, I think we can be summarised as. Anybody anything else, or shall we? Councillor Dornton.
Please, if I could just mention under Appendix 1.3 in the benefits to be achieved column, if we really can achieve those benefits by October 2023, it will make a huge difference to us, to people sitting around this table and our colleagues on the county council, and also to parish councillors. I think that's what you've listed there is really key. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dornton. I don't think you're going to get any dissent on that one. Brilliant. Members, can we move to the vote then? So the committee is asked to note, review and endorse the approach outlined in this report to transform and improve the highways service and the Highways Improvement Action Plan Appendix 1. And B, note the response to the motion to full council regarding highways maintenance as outlined in paragraph 1.12 in this report. Can I take that by affirmation? Any dissent? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. We are getting towards the end. Okay, so item 11 is the Finance Monitoring Report, Outrun Report 2023-24, and Sarah Hayward, the Strategic Finance Manager, will introduce it. Sarah, on Zoom, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the Outturn Report for the 2022-23 financial year. On the revenue side, I'm pleased to say there's no surprises. So the variances we were forecasting during the year were accurate in the final position. So the year-end position was a 415k overspend across the whole of the service. On the capital side, there was 1 million less slippage than had previously been forecast. But the actual next report on the agenda, which is the first monitoring report of a new financial year, will ask you to look at the capital carry forwards. But for the actual outturn, the outturn report will show you the actual position. I wasn't going to say anything else on the outturn report unless there's any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions or comments? I think it's fairly straightforward. Councillor Sharp.
I've got one question. It's on page 125 where it talks about an overspend of 395k on parking enforcement, and it talks about contributions to the district's civil parking implementation costs. I didn't think we'd actually gone that far with the CPE, so I'm just slightly intrigued as to what that is.
The main reason for the overspend or under recovery of income is because of the residual impact of COVID. And we were given funding corporately to cover that, but the funding is held separately than the actual service line, so that we can actually understand. So we didn't want to mask the fact that last financial year we hadn't fully recovered from COVID. So but there was funding separately to offset that. And then separately, I'm sorry, I can't comment on the actual timing of the funding for the districts.
So just come back, that's basically in the city then, isn't it? Because they're the only area that's got CPE at the moment.
I think we probably need to take on away because Sarah is not dealing with the CPE applications. But I think it is actually rolling out further than the city, obviously. Does anyone else have anything else on this, though? No? Brilliant. Okay, so the committee is asked to note and review the report. I'm assuming I can take that by affirmation that we have noted and reviewed. Thank you very much. Okay. So item 12 is the May Finance Monitoring Report, and Sarah will take us through this one as well. Over to you again, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the first Finance Monitoring Report of a new financial year. And there is a capital variance and a forecast capital variance and forecast revenue variance, but they come under E&GI committee. So other than that, there's no variances actually to report to this committee. Separately, though, since the business plan was approved in February, the inflationary assumptions have been reviewed and updated, and a budget reset process has been proposed. And so in paragraph 2.2 of the covering report, you'll note the adjustments which are being proposed to Strategy and Resources Committee. And essentially, they update and correct inflationary allocations, particularly about energy inflation, and correct a couple of small errors where inflation wasn't correctly allocated, but they should have net nil impact on the service delivery. So that's the budget reset. And then Appendix 3 of the Finance Monitoring Report updates the capital budgets for carry forwards from 21-22. Sorry, it updates it for both carry forwards and then also updated profiles where profiles have changed since the business plan was approved and funding changes. And all of these are detailed so you can track for where the business plan budgets have been updated to the FMR, to the latest capital budgets as detailed within this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Do I have any questions on that part of it? I can see Alan looking very serious at his laptop. Do you have any questions there? Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I missed this, Sarah, my apologies, but I didn't see in the report anything about vacancies, which we have had reported to us previously. And I think that is really important and essential that we do get that information. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been advised that we need to have a consistent approach across all committees and that not put ad hoc management information on. So that's so I suggest that vacancies, if that's important to committee, is taken as a standalone report separately rather than piggybacked onto this finance monitoring report.
I hope that we can agree as a committee, Chair, that we can do that, because I think that, you know, this is a service very much about people. And if we're running with a huge number of vacancies, as we were previously in local projects, then we can't deliver the things that we're supposed to be delivering. So we need that information as a committee, I believe.
King, I'm sure you remember, I think it was back in March, we had Sue took us through an entire report on the vacancy rate.
March was quite some time ago, Chair. And I think that it would be useful to have a report each time we met as a committee, but at least every 3 months anyway.
We meet every 3 months, so
Oh.
that would be a similar thing. I'm sure we could look at updating that.
We do have some reserved dates, though, Chair, and I just think it's so important to monitor, to have that information for us to understand how things are going. And it was only, may I just say this, that it was really only because the predecessor of this committee asked for vacancy information that we actually started to do something about it, because before then it was just something that was under the radar, and this was before Sue's time, so it's not reflecting Sue or this committee, but you know, that's how it got onto the agenda. Thank you.
Sue, Director of Highways, do you want to comment on that?
I was going to suggest that we include that vacancy information or the recruitment information within a performance report and capture it in that way, so it becomes part of the regular reporting. But it will be the recruitment as well as the vacancy levels that we will report.
I'm very happy with that, Chair, and I look forward to seeing that. When will we get that report, Sue?
I think the performance reporting is on the next agenda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item? Councillor Sharp.
Just one very quick question, and I don't expect the answer now, and it's going to go to strategy and resources anyways. Just on page 150, the highways maintenance inflation of 38,000 seems very low. So I don't expect necessarily a detailed answer, but be useful. Clark can ask the question at SNR when it comes to it in a couple of weeks.
I can respond on that.
Okay.
What happened was there's many different elements, and inflation was allocated to all of them. One relatively small budget was missed out, and so it's just an extra little catch up. So we've done a very thorough check to make sure everything has got the correct inflation, and that's just filling the gap.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In that case, then, the committee is asked to endorse the revenue budget reset adjustments to Strategy and Resources Committee for approval, endorse the carry forward reprofiling funding changes to capital program Strategy and Resources for approval, and review and comment on the report. Can I take that by affirmation? Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, the final item on today's agenda is the committee agenda plan and appointments. The Democratic Services Manager will take us through the agenda plan and the appointments. Dan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Since publication of the agenda plan, there's no changes to that. With regard to appointments to outside bodies and internal advisory groups and panels, the first meeting of the municipal year, we reappoint to those respective groups. Since publication, I've been informed of the following changes. So the Transport Strategy Huntingdonshire Member Working Group, Councillor Ian Gardner is nominated, and also to the 20-mile-an-hour member working group. And East Cambridgeshire Local Highway Improvement Panel, councillors Bill Hunt and Ellen Sharp. Other than that, I'm not aware of any further changes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dan, on that one. Any comments or questions from the committee? Councillor King.
I'll finish as I started, Chair. It's a comment and a plea. I'm a member of the Wisbech Access Strategy Member Advisory Group, which I'm very happy to be on, and I'm grateful to be reappointed. It does say there that there are 6 meetings per annum. We haven't met for ages and ages and ages. So could we at least have a report or possibly an email update on where we are with this? Because
David is nodding his head, so I
issue.
think that's a yes.
Sorry?
David's nodding his head and agreeing, so that's
Very important for Wisbech. Thank you.
brilliant. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. The agenda plan for all the meetings, apart from next meeting, looks extremely thin. Could you work with officers to flesh it out a bit? And I think Sue said that we would definitely be talking about performance and vacancy management next time, which I think is important. Will parking and enforcement policy include what is planned for Fenland and Hunts and the other places as well? Thank you.
So on the first point there about agenda planning, definitely. Sue, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, and I was wondering if anybody would spot that the thing I just said was going to be on the next agenda wasn't actually on the next agenda. It was the performance reporting was planned to come to this meeting, but due to the changes that happen corporately in how performance management is being reported, we agreed through CVC that we would defer to that agenda. We've not added it into that agenda, so it will be added. On the parking enforcement policy side, I'm not sure whether that is going to deal, but we can, I'm looking at David. I don't know whether David knows what it is. Will that, so the parking enforcement policy, will that include the CPE work that's going forward? Yes.
It will include an update there on it. I think it is mainly a policy paper though. Just so yes, the agenda planning, I am very keen that we flesh that out in more detail going forwards. It is a key priority of mine to actually map out what we're doing and how that flows forwards into all of the meetings that we have, because there's so many items on it. Councillor Sharp.
I think another issue which you've touched on earlier is the which I think Frank Scott is the transport improvement plan as well, isn't that? Is that the next meeting or the one?
I believe that's meant to be the tip list.
Without
update.
putting any pressure on.
We'll pick that up. I know we were talking about it in CVC the other day, and I know it is meant to be coming to a report soon, whether it's next one or the one after. We will flesh that out, but thank you very much. It is an important one for us to talk about. Does anybody have anything else? Okay, so there's no other comments. And the committee notes its agenda plan, appointments to outside bodies and advisory group. Yes, take that by affirmation. In that case, then that concludes today's business. Thank you to those members of the press and public who have joined us and have been watching the live stream. I believe we actually had quite a few watching on the live stream at one point. But I now declare this meeting closed. So thank you very much to everyone for coming along. Really appreciate it. I think it's been a good meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Chair. And good to see you, Bill. Where are you off to now? Where are you off to now?
Councillor King, you've got your microphone still on, so you're being picked up on the live stream.
That's